She was the most powerful woman in Seattle. He fixed things for a living, and the night she rolled up her sleeve and showed him the scars she'd hidden for 7 years, he didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He didn't say a word. He just reached across the table and covered her arm with his calloused hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. But love stories like this don't start with a gentle moment in a candlelit cafe. They start with two people who are absolutely certain, down to their bones, that they are completely, permanently, irreparably unlovable. This is that story. Hit the like button right now, drop the name of your city in the comments below. I want to see just how far this story travels, and stay with me until the very end, because I promise you, the best part isn't where you think it is. The alarm went off at 4:47 in the morning, 13 minutes before it was supposed to. Nathan Reed lay flat on his back in the dark, staring at the water stain on the ceiling above his bed, the one shaped roughly like the state of Idaho that he kept meaning to paint over and never did. The apartment was cold. October had arrived mean and early this year, sliding through the gaps around the window frames and settling into the corners of every room like something that planned to stay. He didn't move right away. He never did. There was always this window, 3, maybe 4 minutes, between when his body woke up and when his brain caught up and remembered exactly what his life looked like. He used to hate that window, used to lie there dreading the moment everything came rushing back. These days, he'd learned to just live in it. He turned his head to the left. Through the thin walls separating his room from Lily's, he could hear the particular silence of a sleeping 6-year-old. That impossibly complete stillness that made parents check the monitor even when they knew everything was fine. He listened for a beat, 2 beats. Then he got up. The kitchen was the size of a generous closet. Nathan had learned to move through it efficiently, the way a man learns to navigate any small space he inhabits long enough, without thinking, without bumping into things, without needing to turn on more lights than necessary. He filled the dented thermos. He drank half a cup standing over the sink, staring out at the parking lot 3 floors below, where the street lamps turned the wet asphalt the color of old pewter. Tuesday, he thought. Maybe Wednesday. He'd have to check his phone. The job site was a commercial development going up in Bellevue. 40-minute drive on a good morning, closer to an hour once the rest of Seattle woke up and decided it also needed to be somewhere. Nathan had been on the crew for 9 months. Good pay, not great. Steady, which mattered more. The foreman, a barrel-shaped man named Cliff, who communicated primarily through grunts and the occasional devastating precision of a single perfectly chosen word, had made it quietly clear that Nathan was being considered for a crew lead position in the spring. Nathan had said he appreciated it. He hadn't told Cliff he was also terrified of it. More responsibility meant more hours. More hours meant less time with Lily. Less time with Lily meant the whole careful architecture of their daily life. The pickup schedules, the homework routines, the negotiated bedtimes started to buckle. He checked his phone. Wednesday, 5:02 a.m. He had exactly 43 minutes before he needed to leave. He spent 20 of them doing laundry. The drive to Bellevue was quiet and dark, the highway cutting through the city like a slow river. Nathan kept the radio low, some AM station that played classic country at this hour. The real stuff, Merle Haggard and Loretta Lynn, voices that understood what it meant to be tired without making it sound romantic. He thought about Lily's parent-teacher conference next week. He thought about the exhaust sound the truck had started making, the one that wasn't quite a rattle and wasn't quite a grind, but lived uncomfortably in the space between. He thought, briefly, about the conversation he'd had with his best friend Marcus 3 days ago. Marcus, who was arguably the most relentlessly optimistic human being Nathan had ever encountered. A quality Nathan found both deeply endearing and occasionally exhausting. "One date," Marcus had said. "Just one. I'm not asking you to fall in love, man. I'm asking you to eat food in the presence of another adult." "I eat food in the presence of adults every day," Nathan had said. "On the job site." "That doesn't count, and you know it." "Why not?" "Because Cliff hasn't showered since September." Nathan had almost smiled at that. "Who is she?" he'd asked, despite himself. Marcus had gone slightly evasive in that particular way he had when he knew the answer was going to be complicated. "She's someone my sister knows. From work." "What does she do?" She's Marcus cleared his throat. She runs a company. What kind of company? A big one. Nathan had looked at him then, really looked at him. Marcus. Healthcare sector. It's a healthcare company. She's the CEO. The silence that followed lasted long enough to become its own kind of statement. You want me, Nathan said slowly, a construction worker who drives a truck with a bad exhaust pipe and can't remember the last time I wore a shirt that didn't have concrete on it. You want me to go on a blind date with a CEO? She's a regular person, Nathan. She puts her pants on one leg at a time, same as anybody. She probably wears different pants than me, Marcus. That's not the point. The point, Nathan said, with the particular quiet firmness of a man who had been humiliated enough times in his life to recognize the shape of the situation coming toward him, is that I've done this. I've sat across the table from women who make more money in an afternoon than I make in a month, and I've watched the exact moment when they do the math and realize I'm not what they thought. And I'm not... He stopped, started again. I'm not doing that again. Marcus was quiet for a moment. A real moment, not a strategic one. She's been hurt too, man, he finally said. She's not who you think she is from the outside. My sister says she's barely been on a date in 2 years. 2 years is nothing, Nathan said. I haven't been on a date in... He stopped again, did the actual mental math, and felt something tired move through his chest. 3.5 years. I know. I've got Lily. I know that too. She's my whole life, Marcus. She has to be. She's 6 years old, Nathan. Marcus said it gently, the way you say something to someone who needs to hear it but has been avoiding it. She's not supposed to be your whole life. She's supposed to be a part of it. Nathan didn't answer. He hadn't said yes that day, but he hadn't exactly said no either. Mom. By the time he got to the job site, the crew was already assembling in the cold blue pre-dawn, breath-fogging, coffee cups in hand. The framing on the 4th floor had hit a snag the day before, some miscommunication between the architect's revised drawings and what had actually been poured. And the morning was going to involve the specific misery of undoing work that had already been done. Nathan pulled on his gloves, drank the last of his thermos coffee, and climbed. The job site had its own rhythm, its own language. Nathan had been working construction since he was 22, had started as the youngest guy on every crew, and gradually stopped being the youngest guy anywhere, and understood this world in a way that was almost cellular. The way weight distributed across a structure, the way weather changed the behavior of materials, the way men communicated through action and silence, and the precise angle of a nod. He was good at his job. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly good at it, which was something he had mostly stopped finding satisfying and mostly started taking for granted. The problem with being good at the thing that pays your bills is that it stops feeling like an accomplishment and starts feeling like your minimum daily requirement. Read. That was Cliff, appearing at his shoulder around 9 in the morning with the blueprints tucked under one arm, and that expression he wore when he was about to ask someone to solve a problem that wasn't technically their problem. Come look at something. Nathan came. The problem turned out to be solvable. Most problems, he'd found, were. You just had to look at them directly instead of around them. He spent the morning solving it. At 3:15 in the afternoon, his phone buzzed in his pocket. The text was from a number labeled Lily's School. This is Ms. Patterson from Meadowbrook Elementary. Would it be possible to arrange a time to speak this week? Nothing urgent. Lily is fine. Just wanted to touch base about some things we noticed in class. Nathan read the text 3 times. Nothing urgent. Lily is fine was the kind of reassurance that immediately made you more worried about exactly the thing it was trying to reassure you about. He texted back that he could come in Friday after pickup. Then he stood on the 4th floor of a building that didn't have walls yet, the wind coming off the sound and cutting through his jacket, and he thought about his daughter sitting somewhere in her classroom right now, small and serious, and trying to figure out how to be okay in a world where her mother had left without much explanation when she was 3 years old and never really came back. He thought about the way Lily sometimes got very quiet at dinner, not sullen, not upset, just somewhere else. Like she was calculating something internal that she hadn't decided how to express yet. He thought about the drawing she'd brought home last week, the one she'd made in art class. Most of the kids had drawn their families, 2 parents, siblings, the standard domestic tableau. Lily had drawn Nathan and herself and their cat Biscuit, who was 15 years old and mostly deaf and had survived longer than Nathan's last 3 relationships. She'd drawn a 4th figure, though, off to one side, slightly smaller than the others. Just an outline, uncolored, like someone she wasn't sure about yet. When Nathan had asked who that was, Lily had considered the question with the seriousness she applied to most things and said, "I don't know yet. I'm saving that space." He hadn't known what to do with that, so he'd put the drawing on the refrigerator. He still hadn't known what to do with it. He said yes to Marcus on Thursday. He didn't know entirely why. Maybe it was Lily's drawing. Maybe it was the water stain on the ceiling. Maybe it was the simple accumulated weight of 3:15 a.m. alarms and parking lot views and coffee drunks standing over the sink. The specific loneliness of a life that was good enough but only just, and getting quieter at the edges. Saturday night, Marcus said, with the barely contained triumph of a man who had been waiting 18 months to hear those 2 words. 7 o'clock. Place called Ember on 5th, you know it? No. It's nice, but it's not intimidating nice. It's real food, good lighting. She picked it. She picked it? I know. Good sign. Or she's trying to control the environment. Nathan. I'm just saying. You're going to like her. You don't know that. I do, actually. Marcus said it simply, without performance. I really do. Nathan dropped Lily at his neighbor Janet's apartment at 6:30 Saturday evening. Janet was 71 years old, had been a nurse for 40 years, and treated babysitting Lily with the same professional competence she'd brought to everything else in her life. Lily adored her. Nathan trusted her absolutely, which was a short list. "You look nice," Janet said, taking in his clothes with the frank assessment of a woman who had raised 4 children and had no remaining patience for vagueness. "I look like a person who owns more than 3 shirts," Nathan said. "Same thing. Have fun." She said it firmly, like a prescription. He drove to Ember on 5th. He sat in the parking lot for 6 minutes. He had been on exactly 4 dates in the 3.5 years since his last relationship had ended. Ended being a generous word for what Rachel had done, which was leave a note on the kitchen counter explaining that she needed to find herself, which Nathan had spent approximately 1 week trying to interpret charitably before accepting that it meant she was leaving and he wasn't included in the journey. Those 4 dates had each contained the same essential architecture. Initial polite interest, 20 minutes of conversation during which the woman across from him did the math Nathan had described to Marcus. Job, income, single father, small apartment, no clear upward trajectory. And then a gradual, professionally managed withdrawal of warmth that left the evening technically functional, but emotionally empty in a way that somehow felt worse than not trying at all. He hadn't been angry about it. That was the thing. He understood the calculus. He was just tired of it. He got out of the car. Ember on 5th was exactly what Marcus had promised. Warm without being precious. The lighting doing that particular amber trick that makes everyone look like they're being seen at their best. The hostess found him immediately, the way hostesses always find the man standing alone looking like he's checking for escape routes. "Reed?" she asked. "Yeah. Right this way. The other guest is already here." He followed her to a corner booth near the back, and that was when he saw her. She was looking down at her phone when he arrived, so he had a moment to take her in before she looked up. Dark hair pulled back simply, a cream-colored blouse, the kind of posture that came from years of sitting at the head of conference tables. Striking, yes, but not in a way that hit him immediately. It was the quieter kind of striking, the kind that revealed itself in small details. The tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw was set just slightly too tight, the way she held her phone like it was the one familiar thing in a room that hadn't quite settled yet. She looked, he thought, almost as nervous as he was. Then she looked up. Her eyes were dark and very direct, and for a moment neither of them said anything. "Nathan Reed," he said, extending his hand. "Sorry if I kept you waiting." "Evelyn Harper." She shook it. Her grip was firm, businesslike, then immediately seemed to recalibrate to something less formal. "You didn't. I was early. I'm always early. Occupational habit." A small, self-aware pause. "I'm aware that makes me sound like a control freak." "Does it bother you when things don't start on time?" he asked. She thought about it. Deeply. "Then it probably does," he said. She looked at him for a beat, and then she smiled. A real one, small and slightly startled. like it had arrived before she'd decided to send it. Fair enough? He sat down. The first 20 minutes were the thing. The thing Nathan dreaded most. The resume exchange, the mutual biography, the polite excavation of credentials. He'd been through it enough times to recognize how quickly it turned into an audition neither party had agreed to. But Evelyn didn't open with credentials. She opened with, "What was the worst job you ever had?" He blinked. "Sorry? I always ask that. It tells you more about a person than anything else they'll say all night." She was watching him steadily, no performance in it. "What was yours?" "Summer I was 19, he said, deciding on the spot to just answer honestly. "I worked at a fish processing plant in Anacortes. 12-hour shifts. I smelled like sockeye salmon for approximately 4 months and couldn't eat fish for 3 years after." She winced. "That's a real answer. You asked a real question. Most people give me the polished version, the one that's slightly bad but ultimately character building. That one was both of those things," he said. "Just also very literally smelled terrible." He met her eyes. "Yours?" She didn't hesitate. "Summer associate position at a law firm. 23 years old. I spent 90-hour weeks doing document review in a basement room with no windows, eating vending machine sandwiches, convinced I was going to be the person who changed healthcare from the inside." A beat. "I lasted 11 weeks before I quit and started my own company." "How'd that go?" "Better than the sandwiches." The second smile came a little easier than the first. The conversation found its footing after that. Not smoothly, not without the occasional lull or misfired joke or moment where they were both reaching for the same word at the same time and bumping into each other, but with the specific energy of two people who had both been elsewhere for a long time and were surprised to find themselves present. He told her about Lily. He always told people about Lily early. It was a filtering mechanism, he'd learned. Some people's entire demeanor shifted the moment they heard single father and 6-year-old daughter, not unpleasantly, just differently, like they were suddenly looking at a different picture than the one they'd been examining. Evelyn didn't shift. "What's she like?" she asked. "She's—" He paused, because the real answer was complicated in the way all honest answers about people you love are complicated. "She's old for 6, not in a sad way, in a— She pays attention to things. She notices things other kids her age don't seem to. Like, last week she told me the clouds looked worried. That's the kind of thing she says." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "The clouds looked worried," she repeated. "Yeah." "She's right, actually. They do sometimes." That's what I told her. Something shifted slightly in the air between them. Not dramatically, not the movie scene version. Just a small, real recognition. She told him, in measured increments, about the company she'd built. Harper Health, 7 years from a 2-person startup operating out of a rented office space to a billion-dollar enterprise that had just expanded into 3 new states. She didn't tell it like a victory lap. She told it the way you tell someone about something that cost you enormously and was worth it, and you're still not entirely sure which of those things is true. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "The way it took over everything?" The question landed somewhere real in her. He could see it. She took a moment before answering. "I regret what I had to give up to get there," she said carefully. "Not the company itself, just—" She stopped, looked down at her water glass. "There are things I should have paid more attention to. People. Situations." Another pause. "Myself, probably." It wasn't the kind of thing someone said to look vulnerable. It was the kind of thing someone said when they'd been alone with the truth of it long enough that saying it out loud felt like setting down weight. "Yeah," Nathan said quietly. "I know something about that." They were somewhere in the second hour of dinner when it happened. The conversation had moved into a comfortable rhythm, the kind where you're no longer performing, where you're just talking, where the food has been eaten and neither of you has reached for the check, because reaching for the check would mean acknowledging that the evening has to end. They were talking about Seattle winters, actually, which is the kind of subject that sounds dull and isn't, because what you're really talking about is how people cope with darkness. "I grew up here," Evelyn was saying. "You'd think I'd be used to it, the gray. But every November I go through this. I don't want to say depression, because that's not quite right. It's more like the world gets very small." "How do you deal with it?" "Work," she said flatly, which is either a very practical answer or a very unhealthy one, depending on who you ask. Probably both. Probably. She looked at him. What about you? Lily, he said simply. You can't spiral too far when there's a 6-year-old who needs breakfast. She laughed at that, a real laugh, low and genuine, the kind that she seemed slightly surprised by. And then she shifted, almost unconsciously, to reach for her water glass, and in the movement her sleeve rode up. Just a few inches, just enough. The skin on her right forearm, the inside of it, running from wrist to elbow, was marked by burn scars. Not small, the kind of scarring that told a whole story in the shape of it, in the way the skin had healed and settled over years. Old scars, the kind that had been with someone so long they'd become part of the landscape of them. She noticed him noticing. The change in her was immediate and physical, the way her shoulder came up slightly, the way her posture contracted, the automatic reach of her left hand toward her right sleeve to pull it back down. All of it happening in less than 2 seconds, fast enough that someone who wasn't paying attention might have missed it. But he was paying attention. He had been paying attention all night, actually. That was the thing nobody told you about loneliness. It made you a better listener because you were so hungry for something real that you absorbed every detail. She didn't pull the sleeve down. What she did instead was something that clearly cost her. She stopped moving. She let the sleeve stay where it was. And she looked at him across the table with something in her eyes that wasn't fear exactly, but lived in the same neighborhood. The tense, braced quality of someone waiting to see which way the moment was going to fall. She waited. And Nathan, who had spent 3.5 years being very carefully, very quietly invisible, who understood at a cellular level what it felt like to be seen in a way that made you wish you weren't, did something that surprised even him. He reached across the table, not toward the scars, not calling attention to them. He simply covered her forearm gently with his hand, the way you'd cover a document you didn't want the wind to take, the way you'd steady something that was trying not to fall. Just, I see it, and it doesn't change anything, and we can keep going now. I'm not going anywhere, he said. It came out quieter than he intended, but she heard it. The moment stretched between them, fragile and real in the way that matters. He felt the tension in her arm not exactly release but shift, like something that had been held very tight for a very long time had decided, tentatively, that it might be okay to loosen. She stopped, cleared her throat. Most people either stare or work very hard not to. Those are the only 2 options. Those are bad options. Yes, she said. They are. A beat. Do you want to talk about it? He asked. Not tonight, she said. Okay. But not ever, necessarily. Just, she looked at him steadily. Not tonight. Okay, he said again. And then, because neither of them knew what else to do with a moment that had suddenly become more real than either of them had planned for on a first date, on a Saturday in October, he said, Do you want dessert? I saw something on the menu that had the word chocolate in it 3 times, which I think is technically a legal requirement for ordering. She looked at him, and then she laughed. Properly this time, the full, unguarded kind. Yes, she said, I want dessert. He drove home with the windows cracked despite the cold, the way you do when you need the air to be real. Janet was asleep in his armchair with the television on low. Some home renovation show with the sound muted, images of before and after rooms cycling silently. Lily was asleep in her bed, one arm around a stuffed elephant named Gerald, her hair spread across the pillow in the particular chaotic halo of a sleeping child. Nathan stood in her doorway for a long moment. He thought about what Evelyn Harper had looked like in that split second before she'd forced herself to stop reaching for her sleeve. The specific brace of it, the way a person looks when they've been hurt enough times by a particular thing that they start the bracing before it's even happened, because the body learns the shape of pain before the mind does. He knew something about that kind of bracing. Not from scars, just from years of sitting across tables and watching women do the math and coming up short in the calculation, and the particular exhaustion of continuing to try anyway. He thought about the way she'd said, I'm not going anywhere. Or rather, the way she'd heard it when he said it. The way something in her face had shifted, like she'd been given a piece of information she didn't quite know yet how to process. He thought, I meant it. He wasn't sure, going into that dinner, that he'd meant much of anything, But he'd said it, and it was true, and he had no idea what to do with that. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't open it. This is Evelyn. Marcus gave me your number. I hope that's all right. I just wanted to say thank you for tonight. I'm not very good at these things, in case that wasn't obvious. E? He stood in the hallway outside Lily's room and read it 3 times. Then he typed back, "You seemed pretty good at it to me. Thank you for the triple chocolate thing. My life is slightly better now." He didn't expect an immediate response. It was almost midnight. 3 minutes later, the ganache layer was doing a lot of heavy lifting. He smiled at his phone in the dark hallway. "Good night, Evelyn Harper." "Good night, Nathan Reed." He put his phone in his pocket and went to bed. He lay on his back and looked at the water stain on the ceiling, the one shaped like Idaho, the one he kept meaning to paint over. And for the first time in a long while, he was thinking about something other than the list of things that needed doing. He was thinking about a woman who had rolled a sleeve down and then stopped herself. He was thinking about what it cost her not to stop. He fell asleep before he meant to, which was the best way to fall asleep. In Lily's room, Gerald the elephant kept watch. On the refrigerator, the drawing with the uncolored figure stood slightly apart from the others, waiting, as Lily had said, for someone who hadn't been decided yet. Outside, the Seattle rain came down steady and indifferent and clean, the way it always did this time of year, washing the streets into mirrors that reflected the lights of the city back up at itself, bright and uncertain and ongoing. The first text came on a Sunday morning, 9 days after Ember on 5th. Not from Evelyn, from Nathan. He'd been standing in the cereal aisle at the grocery store with Lily, who had very strong opinions about which cartoon animal should appear on her breakfast box, and was in the process of making her case with the kind of methodical seriousness usually reserved for legal proceedings. When his phone buzzed and he looked down and saw Evelyn's name, and his stomach did something he hadn't authorized it to do. He hadn't texted her since that first night. She hadn't texted him. 9 days of silence that he'd talked himself into believing was mutual and comfortable, and not at all the thing that woke him up at 2 a.m. occasionally and sat on his chest, except it wasn't a text from her. It was a news notification. Harper Health announces expansion into Pacific Northwest rural markets. He'd set up a news alert on her company. He hadn't admitted that to himself until that exact moment in the cereal aisle, and the admission was uncomfortable enough that he looked at Lily and said, "Okay." The bear. Final answer. Lily considered this. The bear has a sad face. The bear has a determined face. What's determined? It means you've made up your mind about something even when it's hard. She looked at the box for another long moment. "Okay," she said. The bear. He put it in the cart and texted Evelyn. "Saw the news about the expansion. Congratulations. That's a real thing." He put his phone in his pocket and didn't expect anything back for hours, because she was a CEO, and it was Sunday morning, and she was probably in a meeting or reviewing contracts or doing whatever people did when they ran billion-dollar companies on their days off. His phone buzzed 40 seconds later. "Thank you. It's terrifying, if I'm honest. We're talking about communities that have never had adequate healthcare access. The pressure to not screw it up is significant." He read that standing next to the yogurt section, Lily now several feet ahead examining a display of Halloween candy with the focused intensity of a professional assessor. "That's how you know it matters," he typed back. "The stuff that doesn't scare you usually doesn't matter." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. That's either very wise or very convenient. Bit of both, probably. "How's the determined bear?" He stopped walking. "How do you—" I can hear a 6-year-old in the background of that message. "I don't know how. I just can." He looked at Lily, who was now holding 2 different candy bags in each hand like scales of justice, weighing something cosmic. He typed, "She's conducting a thorough investigation of the Halloween candy situation. It may take some time. Tell her the ones with the orange wrappers are always disappointing. Universal truth. I'll pass it along." He hesitated. Then, "Do you want to get coffee sometime this week?" The dots again, longer this time. "Yes," she wrote. "I do." That was how it started, properly. Not with a grand gesture or a declared intention, but with a news alert and a cereal aisle and a small, honest yes sent on a Sunday morning. They met for coffee on Wednesday, a place near her office downtown, which Nathan had driven past 100 times without ever going inside. The kind of cafe that had a specific aesthetic and a specific clientele and a specific price point that had always made him feel like the outside was enough. He arrived first this time, which felt important in a way he couldn't have fully articulated. He was already seated when she came through the door, still in her work clothes, a phone pressed to her ear, one finger raised in the universal gesture of one more minute directed at no one in particular. He watched her finish the call. Whatever the conversation was, it wasn't going the way she wanted. He could see it in the compression of her mouth, the very controlled stillness of someone managing frustration with professional precision. She said 3 sentences, listened to the response, said 2 more sentences with the finality of someone closing a door, and hung up. Then she came to the table, sat down across from him, and said, "Sorry, board member." "Everything okay?" "It will be." She picked up the menu, then put it down. "I already know what I want. I've been coming here for 2 years. She looked at him. "What about you?" "First time," he said. Something moved across her face, a small recalibration. "I didn't think about that. I suggested it because it's easy for me. I should have—" "It's fine," he said. "It's a good place." He looked around. Dark wood, plants in the windows, a counter with pastries arranged like a museum exhibit. Slightly more plants than I'm used to, but they're a bit aggressive with the plants, she agreed, and that eased something between them. The Wednesday coffee became a Thursday walk along the waterfront the following week, which became a Saturday lunch 3 weeks after that, which became a pattern that neither of them named because naming it would have required acknowledging what they were doing, and what they were doing was complicated enough without language on top of it. What they were doing, specifically, was learning each other in the cautious, incremental way that people learn things when they've been burned, not by fire, or not only by fire, but by the particular burning of being vulnerable and having it go wrong. Nathan noticed things. He was good at noticing. A professional habit that had migrated into his personal life so thoroughly he couldn't separate them anymore. He noticed that Evelyn wore long sleeves every time they met, even when the weather didn't require it, and that she had developed a way of positioning herself at tables, slightly angled, right arm toward the wall, that made the sleeve situation unremarkable. He noticed that she talked about her work with a precision and fluency that was almost like watching a musician play a very difficult piece, and that the fluency faded slightly at the edges of conversations about anything before the company. He noticed that she laughed more easily than she seemed to expect to. He noticed that she asked questions about Lily constantly, genuinely curious, not performatively interested the way some adults were with children, as though they were fulfilling a social obligation. She wanted to know specific things, what Lily's favorite book was this week, whether she'd decided what she wanted to be for Halloween, how the parent-teacher conference had gone. That last one had been a real conversation, held over terrible coffee in a diner near the job site one evening after Nathan's shift. "Ms. Patterson thinks Lily is processing some things about her mother," he'd said, looking at his coffee cup. "That the quietness in class is— She said Lily sometimes seems like she's waiting for something. She couldn't say exactly what." "What did you say to that?" "I said I knew." A pause. "Rachel left when Lily was 3. She sends a card at Christmas sometimes, birthday occasionally." He turned the coffee cup. "Lily doesn't really ask about her much anymore, which is somehow worse than when she did." Evelyn was quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet. The kind of quiet that meant she was actually sitting with what he'd said instead of rushing to fill it. "My parents died when I was 23, she said finally. It came out measured, like she'd decided how much of it to say. "House fire. I was visiting for the weekend. I got out. She stopped. "They didn't." Nathan looked at her. "The scars," she said, as if he needed the connection explained. "He didn't. I went back in. Tried to, Another stop. "It wasn't enough." "Evelyn, I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me." She said it quickly, firmly, the CEO voice for a moment. Then it faded. "I'm telling you because Lily waiting for something. I understand that. After the fire, I spent years waiting for the moment when I'd stop feeling like something fundamental had been removed from me without my permission." She met his eyes. It doesn't fully stop, but it gets different. Does it get better? It gets different, she repeated. Better is a word I'd want to use carefully. He thought about that for a long time after he drove home. He thought about a 23-year-old woman running back into a burning house and what that said about who she was, and also what it had cost her, and also how she'd taken that cost and built an entire billion-dollar enterprise out of the wreckage, as if success could be a kind of retroactive proof that she deserved to survive. He thought, that's what the control is for. That's why she positions herself at tables. That's why the sleeves. He understood that the armor and the wound were the same thing. He'd seen it in the mirror often enough. The invitation came on a Friday morning in November, delivered by text at 7:04 a.m. while Nathan was driving Lily to school. He read it at the red light, which he knew he wasn't supposed to do, and almost drove through the intersection when the light changed. Marcus had apparently, through the complicated social geometry of his sister's relationship with Evelyn, managed to rope them both into volunteering for a community project the following Saturday. A playground build for a pediatric burn care facility, a small nonprofit affiliated with a children's hospital in Renton that worked with kids recovering from severe burn injuries. The kind of organization that ran on donations and volunteer weekends and sheer stubborn institutional willpower. Nathan had done volunteer builds before. He was good at them, enjoyed the particular democratic quality of a work site where everyone's skill was equally valued and the goal was clear and visible and done by the end of the day. What he hadn't done was invite Evelyn. He sat on that for most of the morning before he texted her. He turned it over carefully, examining it from different angles the way he examined load-bearing structures, looking for the places where the weight might be more than the material could hold. He knew what the place was. He knew who the kids were. He knew what it would ask of her just to be there. The staring, or the conspicuous not staring, or the children themselves who would see her scars and might say something or might not. And either way would be in their own particular states of recovery and visibility that would put her scars into a context she'd spent years avoiding. He almost didn't ask. Then he thought about the drawing on his refrigerator, the one with the uncolored figure saving space. He texted her. There's a volunteer project next Saturday, building a playground for kids at a burn care facility in Renton. Marcus roped me in. You don't have to come. There's zero pressure, but I wanted to ask. He put his phone down and went back to work. She didn't answer for 4 hours. He noticed when the 4 hours ended. I'll be honest. My first reaction was no. He typed, "That's a fair reaction." My second reaction was also no. Also fair. My third reaction was that I've said no to a lot of things for a long time because they were uncomfortable, and I'm not sure that's been working very well for me. He put down the piece of framing lumber he was holding. Around him, the job site continued its orchestrated noise, saws and compressors and men calling to each other across the structure. He was standing in the middle of all of it with his phone in his hand. You don't have to go, he typed. Genuinely, I know. A pause, then, but if I come, will you stay close? He read it twice, the ask in it, the specific courage it took to make that ask for a woman who operated at the level she did, who managed hundreds of employees and sat across from investors and carried her damage so quietly that most people who dealt with her professionally had no idea it existed. The whole time, he typed back. I'll be right there. Another pause. Longer. Okay, she wrote. Okay, I'll come. He stood on the 4th floor of the building with the wind coming off the sound and thought, good. And then he thought, please don't let this go wrong. He drove to her building Saturday morning at 7:30 and found her waiting outside in the gray November pre-dawn, wearing work clothes and boots and, for the first time since he'd known her, a short-sleeved shirt under an open jacket. He almost said something and then didn't, because some things didn't need saying, and what she'd chosen to wear that morning had cost more than he was going to diminish by pointing at it. Hi, he said. Hi. She looked at his truck. Is that the exhaust thing you mentioned? The truck did, at that moment, produce a sound that was technically between a rattle and a grind. She's communicating, he said. She sounds distressed. She's dramatic. She'll be fine. He opened the passenger door. Ready? She looked at him. Not at the facility they were going to, not at the day ahead. At him. like she was checking that the thing he'd promised was still true. "Are you going to stay close?" "Yeah," he said simply. "I am." She got in the truck. The facility in Renton was smaller than Nathan had expected, and larger than it probably looked from the outside. A complex of low buildings arranged around a central courtyard, the kind of design that prioritized natural light and outdoor visibility, good for kids who spent a lot of time indoors recovering. The playground project was in the courtyard, an existing structure that needed significant replacement and expansion. A crew of about 20 volunteers had already assembled by the time Nathan parked, Marcus among them, wearing a fluorescent vest and an expression of barely suppressed delight at seeing them arrive together. Nathan gave him a look that communicated several things efficiently. Marcus nodded, composed himself, and became suddenly very focused on his clipboard. The children weren't out yet. It was too early, and the morning program hadn't started. But Nathan could see them through the windows of one of the buildings. 8 or 9 kids, ages ranging from maybe 5 to 12, sitting in a common room. Some of them had visible scarring on their faces, necks, arms. All of them looked like kids, bored, eating breakfast, one boy in a specific argument with someone about something, the particular loud righteousness of a 10-year-old making his point. He watched Evelyn look at them through the glass. He couldn't read her expression exactly. It was doing several things at once. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said. Then, "Ask me again in an hour." They worked. That was the thing about volunteer builds. The work was real, and the work was demanding. And you couldn't overthink anything while you were doing it because the material in front of you required your full attention. Nathan was in his element, moving between stations, his hands knowing what to do before his brain finished the instruction. He'd set Evelyn up with a task that was physically manageable but genuinely useful, assembling the modular components of the play structure according to the manufacturer's instructions, which required spatial reasoning and careful sequencing, and which she turned out to be very good at. "You have a natural feel for load distribution," he told her, examining a section she'd put together. She looked up. "Is that a compliment?" "In my world, it's a significant one." She went back to work, and he could see, just barely, the slight release of tension in her shoulders. The children came out around 9:30. It didn't happen the way Nathan had feared. The adults weren't the problem. Most of the volunteers were too busy to stare, and those who weren't had the self-awareness to manage themselves. The children, though, moved through the space with the unself-consciousness of people who had been in enough clinical settings to have suspended most of their social inhibitions about bodies that looked different. A girl, 7 or 8, with burn scarring on her left arm and neck, a bright orange knit hat pulled down to her ears, came to stand near where Evelyn was working. She just stood there for a moment, watching. Evelyn noticed her and went still. "What are you making?" the girl asked. "The climbing wall part," Evelyn said. Her voice was even, but Nathan, standing 6 feet away sorting hardware, heard the slight effort in it. "It's going to go here on this side." "I like climbing," the girl said. "I couldn't for a long time. After." She gestured vaguely at her arm, the way kids do with things they've already integrated, things that have become simply part of the explanation of themselves. "But now I can again." "That's really good," Evelyn said. "My doctor says I'm strong." The girl said it with the satisfied certainty of someone who has been told an important thing and has chosen to believe it completely. She looked at Evelyn's arm, the scars that were visible now, for the first time, in the November morning light. She looked at them with the direct interest of a child who has not yet learned to look away from things. "You're strong too," she said simply. "You look strong." The silence that followed was very short, but felt much longer. "Thank you," Evelyn said. It came out slightly unsteady at the edges. The girl nodded, already turning away, already interested in something else, the way children are. The gravity of the exchange entirely naturalized in her, just a thing she'd said because it was true, and she'd noticed it, and saying true things seemed like the obvious response. Nathan didn't look at Evelyn. He sorted his hardware. He gave her the space that the moment required, but he stayed exactly where he was. By 11, Evelyn was helping 2 boys with the safety surface installation, the rubber matting that went underneath the structure. She was down on her knees doing something he couldn't see from where he was, and one of the boys was clearly explaining something to her at length, and she was listening with her whole body the way some people do, fully oriented, fully present. And then she said something back that made both boys laugh, a real laugh, the unguarded kind. He hadn't heard her laugh like that before. It was different from the dinner version, different from the coffee version. It was what she sounded like when she forgot to manage herself. He found Marcus appearing at his shoulder around noon. "She's good with them," Marcus said quietly. "Yeah," Nathan said. "She doing okay?" He looked at her, on her feet now, demonstrating something to a small boy who was watching her with great seriousness, her sleeves pushed up entirely, her scars visible in the flat winter light, her whole self simply present in the moment without the careful positioning, without the angled shoulder, without any of the architecture of concealment she'd spent years constructing. "Better than okay," he said. He meant it in a way that had nothing to do with the playground. Lunch was sandwiches eaten on sawhorses and in camp chairs scattered around the work site, the organized chaos of 20 people and a dozen children in a small outdoor space. Evelyn ended up sitting on an upturned crate next to Nathan, eating a turkey sandwich with the focused attention of someone who'd skipped breakfast and wasn't going to apologize for it. "That girl," she said, between bites. "The one with the orange hat." "Yeah." She just said it, like it was nothing, like it was true, Nathan said. Evelyn looked at her sandwich. "I've heard a lot of things about my scars, a lot of different versions of reactions. In 7 years." She paused. "That was the first time one of them made me feel like—" She stopped, looking for the right word, which for a woman as precise with language as she was, meant the word she needed was somewhere she didn't normally go. Like they were just part of me. Not the worst part. Not the most important part. Just part. Nathan didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that would be better than letting that land the way it had. After a moment, she said, "Thank you for asking me." "You did the hard part," he said. "I just drove. You said you'd stay close." "I said that." She looked at him. "You did," she said. "The whole time." A pause. "I noticed." The afternoon wrapped up around 3. The playground wasn't finished. It would take another volunteer day, probably 2. But the structure was up, the bones of it real and visible. And the kids who'd spent the day drifting in and out of the work area had each claimed a section of it already, in the way children claim new territory. The boy who'd been arguing at breakfast was now at the top of the climbing wall, declaring something to no one in particular. Evelyn stood at the edge of the courtyard looking at it. Nathan came to stand beside her, not close enough to crowd her, just there. "You okay?" he asked. Same question as the morning. "Yes," she said. Then, "That's a real answer this time, not just the one I was supposed to give." I could tell. She turned to look at him. In the flat gray afternoon light, without the management, without the careful posture, with sawdust on her jacket and her hair half escaped from whatever she'd put it in this morning, she looked different than she had across the candlelit table at Ember on 5th. Not less striking, more real. "I don't do this," she said. "What?" "This." She gestured, not at anything specific, at the day, at the two of them standing here, at whatever this was becoming. "I stopped doing this. I told myself I was too busy, and then I told myself it wasn't worth the exposure, the risk." She turned back to the playground. 7 years is a long time to be careful." "Yeah," he said. "It is. You've been careful too." 3.5, he said, "since Rachel." He hadn't told her the number before. She absorbed it without making it a bigger deal than it was. Lily's 6. So she was 3 when... Yeah. Quiet between them, the comfortable kind that had taken about 6 weeks to build, and that Nathan had been paying attention to the whole time it developed, the way you pay attention to something that took work to earn. "Nathan." She said his name with the particular weight of someone about to say something they'd been carrying around. He waited. "I'm not good at this. I want you to know that I know that. I'm good at a lot of things, and this isn't one of them, and I'm probably going to..." She stopped. "I'm going to get it wrong sometimes. I'm going to go quiet when I should talk, and I'm going to work when I should stop working, and I'm going to..." "Evelyn." He said her name the same way she'd said his. She stopped. "I drive a truck with a bad exhaust pipe. I forget things. I sometimes feed Lily cereal for dinner because neither of us has the energy for anything else. I woke up last Tuesday and couldn't remember if I'd paid the electricity bill and spent 40 minutes looking for the paperwork in a pile that turned out to be old school drawings. He looked at her steadily. Nobody's good at this. I seem like I've got it together because I've gotten good at the performance of having it together. For Lily's sake. He said it honestly, without drama. Underneath it, I'm making it up as I go. Same as everybody. She looked at him for a long moment. Why are you telling me that? She asked. Not combatively, genuinely wanting to know. Because you just told me something true, he said. Seemed like the right thing to do. The volunteers were packing up around them, loading equipment into trucks, the specific end-of-day energy of people who'd worked hard and earned the drive home. Marcus was somewhere in the mix, sensibly maintaining distance. Evelyn looked at her hands. They were dusty, marked from the work, a small scrape on her left palm she hadn't mentioned. She looked at them for a moment, then back at Nathan. I have a follow-up board call at 6, she said. I can't avoid it. I've got to get Lily from Janet's by 5:30. So, she almost smiled, a graceful natural exit. The best kind. He started toward the truck, then stopped. I'll text you. Okay. About nothing important, the way we do. She did smile then, fully, the unguarded one. The bear's breakfast situation? Exactly that kind of thing. He got in the truck. The engine turned over and produced its signature sound, the rattle-grind conversation that the truck apparently needed to have every time it started. He glanced at the passenger seat, which was empty, which was somehow different from how it had been empty before. He drove out of the parking lot thinking about a girl in an orange hat who said things simply because they were true. He drove home thinking that Evelyn Harper, the most controlled person he'd met in years, had spent an entire afternoon with her sleeves up and her scars in the November light, and hadn't once reached to cover them. He didn't know what to call what was building between them. He wasn't ready to name it yet, and he didn't think she was either, and that was okay. Some structures needed time to cure before you could put weight on them. He'd learned that on job sites. He'd spent years learning it. He picked up Lily at 5:28, 2 minutes early, and Lily told him at length about a dream she'd had about a purple horse who could do math. And Nathan listened to all of it and asked the right follow-up questions. And somewhere in the middle of the drive home, he realized he felt not happy exactly, because happy was too simple and too flat. He felt like the margins of his life had gotten slightly larger, like the walls of the room had moved out an inch or two in every direction. It wasn't enough to be remarkable. It was enough to breathe a little easier. And that, for now, was more than sufficient. December came in hard that year. Not dramatically. Seattle rarely did dramatic weather, preferring instead the slow, gray, accumulated weight of cold and rain and darkness that settled over the city like a wool blanket left outside too long. The kind of weather that didn't announce itself but simply arrived and stayed, and by the third week of it you couldn't quite remember what the light had looked like before. Nathan noticed Evelyn's texts getting shorter in December. Not colder. She was never cold, exactly, even when she was being careful. Just compressed. The ones that used to run 3 or 4 exchanges back and forth over the course of an evening started arriving as single lines, sometimes just a response emoji, sometimes nothing at all until the next morning when she'd send something apologetic about falling asleep at her desk. He didn't push. He wasn't built for pushing. But he paid attention. They still met twice a week when they could manage it. Coffee, usually, because coffee was contained and time-limited and didn't require either of them to fully commit to an evening. He'd pick her up from her building when the hour worked, or she'd appear at the diner near his job site, still in her work clothes, smelling faintly of printer ink and the particular tired energy of someone who has been running on adrenaline and institutional obligation for longer than is medically advisable. She looked thinner in December. He noticed that too. He mentioned it once, carefully, the way you mentioned something you know might land wrong. You eating enough? He asked. They were in the diner, a Tuesday, the tail end of his shift, and the middle of what appeared to be her day, based on the 3 unanswered calls lighting up her phone while she ignored it face down on the table. She looked at him. I eat. When? She stopped. I have a system. What's the system? There's food in my office. My assistant makes sure of it. Your assistant makes sure you eat. It's part of her job description. Evelyn, He said it simply, without judgment, which he'd learned was the only register that actually reached her. That's not a system. That's a backup plan for when the system fails. She looked at the table for a moment. It's Q4, she said. It's always like this in Q4. The board reviews, the annual projections, the expansion compliance reporting. It stacks. And I'm the one who has to... She stopped again. I'm the one at the top, which means when something needs to get done and nobody else can do it, I do it. Nobody else can eat lunch for you either, he said. But here we are. A pause. Then she picked up her coffee and said, with the particular dry precision that was her version of conceding a point, "The diner turkey sandwich is better than anything in my office anyway." He ordered her a turkey sandwich. She ate all of it. He filed that away not as a victory, but as a data point, a small piece of the larger picture he was assembling without quite deciding he was assembling it. The picture was, Evelyn Harper had built an entire professional identity around being the person who held everything together, and the cost of that identity was that she had no one designated to hold her together. And she had been paying that cost for so long, she'd stopped noticing it was a cost and started treating it as simply the operating conditions of her life. He understood this. He understood it more than he let on, actually, because it was adjacent to something he'd done himself. The construction of a life that was stable and functional and pointed entirely outward, toward Lily, toward the job, toward the logistics of a single father making the machine run, leaving no space inside it for anything that wasn't load-bearing. Because load-bearing things were necessary, and things that weren't necessary were risks, and risks were things you couldn't afford when everything you had was already committed. The difference between him and Evelyn was scale and speed. She ran faster, burned hotter, and had more infrastructure around the burning. But the fire was the same. He was thinking about this on a Thursday evening in the second week of December when Marcus called. "Have you talked to her today?" Marcus asked without preamble. Something in his voice made Nathan sit up straighter. He was on his couch with Lily asleep against his arm, the television on low, one of her drawings in his free hand that he'd been holding without looking at it. "Not since this morning. She texted around 9, said she had a full day." "She collapsed," Marcus said. The drawing fell. "What?" "My sister just called me." Evelyn collapsed in her office. She'd been there since 5 a.m. Apparently she hadn't left the building in almost 2 days. She was sleeping in the executive suite. She had some kind of board crisis with the Pacific Northwest expansion, and she just... Marcus paused. "They called an ambulance. She's at Harborview." Nathan was standing up before Marcus finished the sentence, the movement automatic. Lily startled awake and saying, "Daddy?" in the particular confused voice of a child pulled from deep sleep. "Marcus, I need to..." He was already looking for his keys with one hand, reaching for Lily with the other. Is there anyone with her right now?" "Her assistant, I think. Maybe one of her board members." "I'm going." "Nathan, she shouldn't be alone in a hospital, Marcus." A pause. "No," Marcus said. "She shouldn't." He dropped Lily at Janet's. He explained almost nothing because there wasn't time, and Janet, who had been a nurse for 40 years and could read urgency in a person's posture, asked almost nothing in return. She just took Lily's hand and said, "Go." And he went. The drive to Harborview was 23 minutes. He hit every light wrong, which felt personal, which was ridiculous, which did not stop him from feeling it. He parked badly in a structure 2 blocks from the hospital and walked fast through the cold, not running, because running felt like catastrophizing, but close to it, in that particular controlled rapid pace of someone trying to stay calm by containing their body's instructions. The ER waiting area was the specific misery of all ER waiting areas everywhere. The fluorescent light that flattened everything, the plastic chairs, the television mounted high on the wall showing news that nobody was watching, the ambient anxiety of a room full of people waiting to know something they didn't know yet. He found Evelyn's assistant, a small, efficient woman named Diane, who looked like she'd been crying recently and had decided to stop. She recognized Nathan from having called his number once before on Evelyn's behalf, some scheduling thing, months ago, and the recognition seemed to steady her slightly. "She's stable," Diane said immediately. "They're saying exhaustion and dehydration. Her blood pressure dropped. She just went down. I was in the room and she just..." Diane stopped, pressed her lips together. She tried to tell the paramedics she was fine. In the ambulance, she argued with them. Nathan almost laughed at that, except it wasn't funny. "That sounds right," he said. "They have her on fluids. She's conscious. She's—" Diane looked at him. "She's asking for you." He hadn't expected that. Or he had, a little, somewhere. Which was maybe why he'd driven here without stopping to think about whether he was the right person to come. "Can I go in?" Diane looked around with the efficient assessment of a woman who had made things happen for a decade at the highest levels of a major corporation and was not going to let a hospital waiting room stop her now. "Come with me," she said. The room they'd put Evelyn in was small and white, and lit with the particular cold certainty of hospital lighting that made everyone look like a different, more fragile version of themselves. She was in the bed with an IV line in her left arm and monitoring pads on her chest, and she was unmistakably furious about all of it. The furious but controlled variety, the kind that lived in the set of her jaw and the precise way she was holding herself against the pillow, too still, too arranged, like a person trying to look like they're fine when they are in a hospital bed with a heart monitor. She was also, Nathan could see, exhausted in a way that went past the physical, the kind of tired that lived in the eyes, the kind that doesn't come from 2 days without proper sleep. It comes from years of a particular kind of running. She looked at him when he came through the door. Something happened in her face. The control slipped, just for a second, and underneath it was something raw and real that she pulled back almost immediately, the professional mask reasserting itself so fast that someone who wasn't paying close attention might have missed it. He was paying close attention. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I know. Diane shouldn't have—" "I asked her to," he said. Which wasn't exactly true. Diane had told him Nathan had come, but it was true enough in the ways that mattered. He pulled the chair to the side of the bed and sat down. Not dramatically, not with the weight of a grand gesture. Just sat, the way you sit beside someone when you intend to stay. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Fine." "Evelyn." A pause. The jaw tightened. "Like someone plugged my charger in but the cable's frayed and nothing's actually transferring." She looked at the IV line. "They want to keep me overnight for observation. I told them I have a 7 a.m. call with our Pacific Northwest compliance team. They're right to keep you." "Nathan, the compliance call can be handled by someone else for one morning," he said. "Not gently, exactly. Directly. You cannot be handled by someone else." She looked at him. For a moment her face did several things in succession. Resistance, then the thing under the resistance, then something more complicated that he didn't have a name for yet. "I'm fine," she said again, but this time it came out differently. Less declarative. More like something she was trying on to see if it still fit. And finding that it didn't quite. "Tell me what happened," he said. She didn't answer immediately. The monitor beeped its steady, small punctuation. Down the hall, someone was having a conversation, or an argument, or possibly both. The hospital existed around them in its particular relentless way. "The Pacific Northwest expansion," she said finally, her voice leveling into the CEO register she used when she was organizing facts. "We've hit regulatory resistance in 2 of the 3 markets. The compliance infrastructure we built wasn't accounting for some state-specific healthcare licensing requirements, which means we're potentially looking at delayed launches that could affect quarterly projections, which the board is already—" She stopped. Started again, differently. "I was trying to solve it, all of it, before the board call. I had the whole compliance team working. I had our legal counsel in on conference calls until 2 a.m. I hadn't—" She looked at her hands. "I hadn't left the office. For how long?" "Since Tuesday morning." It was Thursday. "Evelyn, I know." She said it before he could continue. "I know, Nathan. I'm aware that I'm aware." She turned her head away, looking at the window, which had blinds but no view. I couldn't let it fail. Not this one. The rural markets, the communities we're trying to reach. If we launch badly, if we create a compliance problem in the first 6 months, it damages the program for years. It damages the credibility of the whole initiative." She turned back to him. "You understand that?" "I understand why you care about it," he said. "I don't understand why you have to be the only person holding it." She was quiet. "You have a team," he said. I know. You built that team specifically so that— I know, Nathan. It came out sharp. Not angry at him. He could hear the difference now. Sharp at herself, which was a different register entirely. I know I have a team. I know I have a chief operations officer and a general counsel and 12 regional directors and a compliance department with 27 people in it. She pressed her hand flat against the bed. And I still can't make myself— She stopped. He waited. I still feel like if I'm not the one watching it, she said quietly, it's going to slip. Something is going to slip. And if something slips, then all of it— She stopped again. All of it was a mistake. The whole thing, everything I built. The room was quiet for a moment. That's not about the expansion, Nathan said. She looked at him. That's an older thing than the expansion, he said carefully. Not pushing. Not diagnosing. Just naming what he could see, the way he named structural issues on job sites. Not to alarm anyone, just because the problem needed a name before it could be addressed. Her face did the complicated thing again. I survived something, she said after a long moment, and She looked at her left arm where the IV was taped, the scar tissue visible above the tape. I was the one who got out. My parents didn't. And I have never in 7 years been able to make myself believe that I deserved to be the one. Her voice was steady, but doing the specific work of steadiness, the kind that requires effort. So I make it make sense by not stopping, by building something they would have been proud of, by being the person who doesn't fail, who doesn't drop anything, who doesn't— She stopped. If I stop, I have to just be a person who was in a fire and lost everything and got out anyway. And I don't— She pressed her lips together. I don't know how to be just that person. The monitor beeped. Down the hall, the conversation or argument continued. Nathan leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and his hands loose and said, My ex-wife left when Lily was 3. She left a note. It said she needed to find herself. He said it flat, without ornament. I spent about a week being angry and about a month being devastated, and then I got very busy, because Lily needed me to be busy. And then being busy became the whole thing, and I stopped. He looked at his hands. I stopped existing as much, outside of the function. I was Nathan who takes care of Lily. I was Nathan who shows up to the job site. I wasn't a lot of other things for a long time. He looked up at her, because being those other things felt like it took attention away from the things that were necessary. And necessary felt safe. Necessary felt like something I couldn't get wrong. She was watching him. Neither of us is good at being just a person, he said. I'm not saying that like it's a flaw. I think we both got here by surviving things that made being just a person feel like not enough. He held her gaze. But you ended up in a hospital bed, Evelyn. And I think the thing that got you here isn't strength. I think it's the thing that looks like strength from the outside and is something else from the inside. She didn't answer for a long time. When she did, her voice was quieter than he'd ever heard it. The CEO register entirely gone. Just her voice, low and tired and stripped of management. I'm scared, she said. Of what? Of stopping. A pause. Of what's there when I stop. What do you think is there? She looked at the window. Just me, she said. Without the company, without the work, without the forward motion. She swallowed. I'm scared it's just not enough. That I'm not enough. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. At the IV line and the monitoring pads and the hospital room and the woman in the middle of all of it who had built a billion-dollar company partly as a monument to 2 people who couldn't see it, and partly as a way of never having to be still long enough to feel how much they were gone. You're enough, he said, simple and direct as a structural load calculation. You were enough before the company. You were enough the night you came to dinner and rolled your sleeve back down and then decided not to. You were enough in Renton when a girl in an orange hat said something true, and you almost cried and didn't, and I saw you not cry, and I thought, that's someone who's been holding themselves together for so long they've forgotten they're allowed to put some of it down. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright in the hospital light, and she was absolutely not going to cry. He could see that. She was holding it with everything she had. And then something gave, very slightly, and a single tear made it past the holding, which she brushed away immediately with the efficiency of a woman who has not cried in front of another person in years and was not going to make a production of starting now. "I hate hospitals," she said. "I know. They make everything feel—" "Yeah. Nathan." She said his name the way she had in the parking lot in Renton, with the particular weight of something she'd been carrying and was setting down. "Why are you here? You have Lily. You have work tomorrow. You drove—" "Because you called my name," he said, through Diane, but still. He settled back in the chair. "And because you've been sitting in that office alone at 2 a.m. solving things by yourself for 7 years, and that's—" He looked at her steadily. "That's too long. Nobody should do that for 7 years." She looked at him for a long moment, not measuring him, not doing the math. She'd stopped doing the math somewhere around the second week of November, he thought, around the time she'd started texting him about nothing important the way they'd established they were allowed to do, just looking at him, taking him in. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay." "Okay what?" "Okay, I'll stay overnight. I'll call David and have him handle the 7 a.m. David was her COO. She said his name like it cost her something to say it, which told Nathan everything about how much she hated delegating. "Good call," Nathan said. "I still need to review the compliance brief before tomorrow." "Nathan, tomorrow," he said again. Not unkindly, firmly. The same way he told Lily 100 times that certain things could wait until morning and would look different in the daylight, which was almost always true. She looked at him, and something in her face shifted. Not defeat, not surrender, but the specific expression of someone who has been arguing with a wall and has finally decided the wall is right. "The chair is uncomfortable," she said. "I've sat on worse. You don't have to stay the whole—" "I'm going to stay," he said. "So let's just skip the part where you argue about it." She looked at him for another moment. Then she lay back against the pillow, very carefully, with the precise control of someone who was exhausted but still managing her own presentation. "The cafeteria coffee is terrible," she said to the ceiling. "All cafeteria coffee is terrible. It's a law. There's a machine on the second floor that does a passable espresso. I'll survive." Quiet settled between them, different from the silence of the waiting room, different from the silence of all the careful spaces they'd built around themselves over years of being alone and functional. This was the quieter kind that accumulates between people who've said the true things and don't need to fill the space afterward. Around midnight, Evelyn fell asleep with the sudden completeness of someone whose body had been waiting for permission. Nathan sat in the uncomfortable chair and watched her for a while, not in a strange way. Just the way you watch someone you've been worried about when the worrying can finally stop for the night. Then he got up quietly and walked to the nurse's station and asked if there was a machine on the second floor that did espresso. There was. He came back with 2 cups, one for him, one for when she woke up, which he set on the bedside table in the particular spot where she'd reach for it automatically. He sat back in the chair and drank his terrible hospital espresso and thought about what she'd said about just being herself without the company, without the forward motion, and how that terrified her. He thought about his refrigerator drawing, the uncolored figure that Lily was saving space for. He thought about the first text on that Sunday morning in the cereal aisle, and the coffee on Wednesday, and the playground in Renton, and a girl in an orange hat who said simple, true things. He thought about how 2 people could spend years becoming very good at being alone and still not get used to it. Not really. Not in the 3 a.m. hours when the quiet was too complete. Around 2 in the morning, Evelyn woke up briefly, the half-conscious waking of someone surfacing from deep sleep without fully arriving. Her hand moved across the bed, feeling for something, and found the edge of the mattress. She opened her eyes a little. He was there. He could see the moment she registered it, the slight relaxation, the specific easing of something that had been held tense. She looked at him across the dark room with the unguarded eyes of someone too tired to manage their expression, and what was in them was simple and undefended. "You're still here," she said, more surprised than she meant to be. "Still here," he confirmed. She nodded, and her eyes closed again. He stayed. When morning came, real morning, the gray Seattle kind, the light filtering through the blinds and the hospital shifting into its daytime register around them, Evelyn woke up properly and found the espresso on the bedside table. She looked at it, looked at Nathan, who was on his second cup and had not slept exactly, but had rested in the way you rest in uncomfortable chairs when you've decided staying matters more than comfort. She picked up the cup, drank, made a face. "That bad?" he asked. "Adequately bad," she said. "Thank you." "The nurses told me you're clear to go home this afternoon," he said. "If your blood pressure stays where they want it this morning." "I know, she's already handling the afternoon." She said it with the slight strangeness of someone who had made a decision in the night that still felt foreign in the daylight. "I delegated 3 things from my phone at 6 a.m. "How did that feel?" She considered. "Like taking off a very tight shoe," she said. "Uncomfortable in a different way than before, but probably better for the foot." He almost smiled. "That's progress?" She turned the cup in her hands and looked at him directly in the morning light, without the management, without the CEO posture, without any of the armor. Just Evelyn, tired and clear-eyed and real. "I want to show you something," she said. "When I'm out of here, there's something at my apartment I've never—" She stopped. "I've never shown anyone, but I want you to see it." "What is it?" "Paintings," she said. "I paint. After the fire, I needed somewhere to put the things I couldn't say out loud, so I painted them." She looked at her cup. "I have a room at the penthouse. I've never let anyone in it." Nathan thought about a woman spending 7 years putting unspeakable things into images and locking the door on them and carrying the key alone. "I'd like to see them," he said. "They're not good," she said immediately. "You don't know what I'll think of them." "I know they're not technically—" "Evelyn." He met her eyes. "I'd like to see them." She looked at him. The morning light did the thing morning light does, made everything slightly more real and slightly more exposed than the night version of the same room. "Okay," she said. She was discharged at 3:15 in the afternoon with a list of instructions that she read on the way out the door and that Nathan took from her hands and put in his jacket pocket, because she was going to need them in writing when the impulse to ignore all of them arrived, which it would, probably around 7 p.m. when her inbox filled up. The drive back to her building was quiet in the good way. He walked her to the lobby, which she let him do without arguing about it, which told him more about her current state than anything she'd said. In the lobby, she turned to him. She still looked tired. The good sleep and the fluids had helped, but you don't undo that kind of exhaustion in one night. Her eyes were clear, though. Clearer than they'd been in weeks. "Come on Saturday," she said. "I'll show you the room." "Saturday," he confirmed. She nodded. Then she said, with the specific directness of someone who has decided something while lying in a hospital bed and is not going to retreat from it, "I don't want to do this alone anymore. This—" She gestured at herself, at the hospital papers that were now in his pocket, at the general shape of her life. "I've been doing it alone for a long time, and it's—" She stopped. "It's not working. The evidence is fairly clear." He looked at her. "You're not alone," he said. "Not as a promise. As a statement of current fact. The way you state facts about structures when you've examined them carefully and you know what they can hold." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded once and turned toward the elevator. He watched her go. He drove home through the gray December afternoon thinking about a room full of locked paintings and what it meant that she was finally going to open the door and how some things could only move when you had someone to stand beside them. He picked up Lily from school. She had made a card in class. A random Tuesday card, not for any occasion, just because she'd wanted to. On the front, she'd drawn a picture of herself and Nathan and Gerald the cat and the uncolored figure from the refrigerator drawing, except this time she'd colored it in. Dark hair. A cream-colored shape that was probably a shirt. He stood in the school parking lot and looked at it for a long moment. "Who is that?" he asked her. Lily considered the drawing with the seriousness she applied to most assessments. "That's Evelyn," she said, as if this were obvious information he should already have. "I decided." He looked at his daughter. "When did you decide?" he asked. "When you came home from the hospital last night," she said. She was already climbing into her car seat, moving on to the next thing. "Your face looked different." "Different how?" "Like when you know where you're going," she said. He buckled her in. He drove home through the gray Seattle afternoon. He did not say anything else about it because Lily was already talking about something else entirely, Some dispute at recess involving a disputed rule about tag that required considerable narrative detail to explain. But he thought about it. His face looked different, like when you know where you're going. He thought maybe that's right. The rain started up again around dinner, steady and indifferent, the Seattle kind that didn't ask permission. Nathan made grilled cheese because neither of them had the energy for anything more ambitious, and Lily ate hers with the focused attention she brought to all food she approved of, and the apartment was warm and small and full of the ordinary particular noise of a weeknight, and on the refrigerator the drawing with the newly colored figure stood in its place. Saturday was 4 days away. He could wait 4 days. Saturday arrived the way important days sometimes do, quietly, without ceremony, the city outside still gray and wet, the kind of morning that didn't announce itself as significant until you were already inside it. Nathan dropped Lily at Marcus's place. This had been arranged with a minimum of explanation on Nathan's part, and a maximum of barely suppressed commentary on Marcus's part, which Nathan had managed by handing over Lily's overnight bag and the specific list of her dietary preferences, and leaving before Marcus could say whatever he was visibly composing. "Have fun," Marcus called after him from the doorway. "She goes to bed at 8:30, Nathan said without turning around. Nathan. He got in the truck. He drove to Evelyn's building through the Saturday morning streets, which had the particular emptiness of a city taking its day off. Fewer cars, a different quality of quiet, the coffee shop starting to fill with people who were somewhere voluntarily rather than because obligation required it. He'd been to her building before, had picked her up from the lobby 4 or 5 times now, had stood in the marble-floored entrance and felt the particular awareness of the distance between his world and hers, not with resentment, just with the clear-eyed acknowledgement that the distance was real and had to be navigated consciously. Today felt different going in. She was waiting in the lobby again, but this time she wasn't dressed for outside. Dark jeans, a simple gray sweater, her hair down in a way he hadn't seen before. She looked like herself, he thought. Not the CEO version, not the carefully assembled public version, just Evelyn on a Saturday morning in her own building. She looked like she hadn't slept perfectly, but she looked like she'd rested, which was better than the hospital version of her, and better than the December version of her, and something he filed away as progress without making a thing of it. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He looked at her. "You look better." 3 days of actual sleep and food my assistant didn't have to smuggle in, she said. Remarkable what it does. She turned toward the elevator. "Come up." The penthouse was something Nathan's brain took a moment to process, not because it was ostentatious, which it wasn't exactly, but because it was the physical expression of a life built on entirely different principles than the one he lived. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the sound, the Seattle skyline laid out like a map of itself in the gray December morning. Everything in it was chosen carefully, not expensively for the sake of expense, but with the specific taste of someone who had grown up without much and then acquired the ability to acquire things and had done so with some deliberateness. But it was also, he noticed, very quiet, very still. The kind of apartment that didn't have the accumulated noise of a life fully lived in it. No mail on the counter that hadn't been sorted yet, no shoes left near the door. No evidence of the small, unglamorous residue that real daily life left behind. It looked, he thought, like a hotel room that someone had been staying in long enough to arrange their things. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please." She made it properly, which he appreciated. Actual grounds, a real machine. None of the single-serve pod situation he maintained at home out of time constraints and low ambition. He stood at the windows while she made it, looking at the water. "The view's different in the winter," she said from the kitchen. "Summer, it's too bright, almost. Right now, it's—" She considered. "Honest." "Yeah," he said. "It is." She brought the coffee and they stood at the windows together for a while, not talking, which they'd gotten good at, the comfortable version of silence rather than the loaded kind. Outside, a container ship moved slowly across the sound, enormous and unhurried in the gray water. "How's the compliance situation?" he asked. He knew she'd been monitoring it all week from home, which was its own kind of progress. Monitoring rather than doing all of it herself. "David's team has it," she said. "It came out slightly stiff, the way things come out when you've said them enough times to start believing them, but haven't arrived fully yet." The legal issue is more manageable than it looked at 2 a.m. on a Thursday in a state of severe sleep deprivation. The board call went fine. She drank her coffee. David sent me a summary afterward. I only rewrote it once before I sent it back. Once is good. It was very hard, she said without irony. He looked at her sideways. You rewrote his summary, or you rewrote yourself? A pause. Both, she said, but I sent David's version. He nodded. That was real progress, the kind that doesn't feel like progress while you're doing it. They finished the coffee. The ship moved out of sight. The quiet between them shifted slightly. Not uncomfortable, but expectant. They both knew what the morning was actually for. She set down her cup. Come on, she said. The room was at the end of a hallway he'd walked past twice before without registering the door. It was the same dark wood as everything else, no different from the other doors. She stopped in front of it and didn't move for a moment. He didn't say anything. He'd learned that her silences before things were working silences, not stuck silences, and that the difference mattered. She reached into the pocket of her jeans and pulled out a key. An actual physical key, the old-fashioned kind, brass, worn smooth from handling. She looked at it for a second, not dramatically, just looking, the way you look at an object you've carried a long time before you decide to use it for what it was actually for. Then she unlocked the door and pushed it open. The smell hit him first, paint, and the specific chemical undertone of linseed oil, and something underneath both of those that was harder to name. Old emotions sealed in a closed space, maybe. The particular atmosphere of a room where difficult things had been made. It was medium-sized, with a single north-facing window that gave even gray winter light without direct sun. The right light for painting, he somehow knew without knowing how he knew it. Every wall was covered. Canvas after canvas, some framed, most not, some stacked in layers against the lower portions of the walls, some hung with the kind of organizational logic that made sense to the person who'd arranged them, and maybe no one else. He walked in. He walked slowly, the way you walk through a space that requires attention. Not saying anything, not reaching for something to say, just looking, really looking. The paintings were not what he'd expected, though he hadn't formed a specific expectation. They were dark, most of them. Not dark in the interior design sense, dark in the emotional sense. Deep oranges and reds that were clearly meant to be fire, but were also clearly something else. Something that lived behind fire and used fire as its grammar. Blacks that weren't flat but layered, textured, that you had to look at for a moment before you saw the forms inside them. And then, not in every painting, but scattered through them like a pattern you noticed gradually. Lighter sections. Not hopeful, exactly. Not cheerful, but surviving. The kind of light that exists because the darkness defines it. He moved through the room slowly. Some of the paintings were clearly from earlier, rougher, less resolved, the marks of someone who was using the medium because they needed to and not because they'd mastered it. Some were recent, he could tell somehow, with a technical confidence that the earlier ones didn't have, but a rawness that hadn't gone away. One painting stopped him completely. It was large, largest in the room, and it depicted something he couldn't immediately name. A figure, but abstracted almost beyond recognition, with the suggestion of reaching arms and a posture that was both falling and rising at the same time. Around the figure, the fire colors. Underneath the figure, something darker. And above, this was the part that stopped him. Above the figure, the sky, rendered in a particular blue-gray that was unmistakably the color of the Seattle sky on exactly the kind of morning happening outside the window right now. He stared at it for a while. "This one," he said. She had followed him into the room but had stayed near the door, watching him move through it with the particular tension of someone waiting for a verdict they've told themselves they don't need. "What about it?" she asked. "When did you paint it?" A pause. "About a year after the fire." He looked at it again. The figure that was falling and rising, the sky above it that was the exact right color of surviving. "You weren't sure yet," he said, "whether you were falling or getting up." She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was careful, measured, covering something that wanted to be less measured. "No," she said. "I wasn't." "Are you sure now?" The question landed between them, heavier than he'd intended, or maybe exactly as heavy as it was. He turned to look at her. She was standing in the doorway of her own locked room, arms crossed at her waist in the self-holding gesture he'd come to recognize as her version of managing herself. And she was looking at the large painting with an expression that was complicated in ways that required more than a moment to read. "I'm more sure than I was," she said, finally. "That's honest." He turned back to the painting, spent another moment with it. "These are extraordinary," he said, not performing admiration. Stating what he thought, the way he stated things about structures when they merited it. "They're real. They're actually real." "They're not technically. Evelyn." He turned fully to face her. "I'm not talking about technique. I'm talking about these are the real thing. Whatever you were trying to put somewhere when you made these, you got it in there. That's not nothing. That's actually a hard thing to do." She looked at him. Her arms were still crossed, but slightly less so. "I've never shown anyone," she said. Not a single person. Diane knows the room exists. My therapist knows I paint. That's it." He absorbed that. 7 years of making things in a locked room that nobody saw. 7 years of putting the most honest version of herself onto canvas and then turning the key. "Why now?" he asked. "Why me?" She thought about it. Not performing thought, actually thinking, her gaze moving to a middle distance between them. "Because you stayed in a hospital chair all night," she said. "And you didn't make it. You didn't turn it into a thing. You just stayed." She looked at him directly. "Because when I told you I was scared, you told me something true about yourself instead of trying to fix me." She paused. "And because I'm tired of this room being locked. I'm tired of the things in it being only mine." She stopped, then pushed through the stop. "I want someone else to know they exist." He held her gaze. "They exist," he said. Something in her face shifted, the controlled surface of it giving way to something underneath that was quieter and more real. She uncrossed her arms, looked around the room at her own paintings with the expression of someone seeing a familiar landscape from a slightly different angle. "I should do something with them," she said, almost to herself. "I've been saying that for 2 years. There's an organization, through the company foundation, that works with burn survivors, art therapy, community programs. I've been funding them for 3 years, and I've never—" She stopped. "I've never offered them anything from me, personally, only the money." "What would you offer them?" "Some of these." She gestured at the walls. "Or, I don't know, a show maybe. Something that said—" She struggled for it. "Something that said someone else got through it, made something from it." She shook her head. It sounds like the right thing," he said. "It's terrifying." "Yeah," he said. "Most right things are." She looked at him. That small, startled smile arrived, the first one he'd seen that day. "You do that a lot. Say the true thing instead of the reassuring thing. Is that bad?" "No," she said. She thought about it. "It's why I trust you." He didn't know what to do with that exactly, so he did what he usually did when something landed heavier than he'd prepared for. He moved on to the next thing, the next step, the way you move through a complicated build. One true thing at a time. "Tell me about this one," he said, moving to a smaller canvas near the window. Dark blues, a shape that might have been a door or might have been a window, impossible to tell from the inside. She came away from the doorway, came to stand beside him, and she told him. They spent 2 hours in that room. Her talking, him listening, occasionally asking, not to fill silence, but because he actually wanted to know, which was different, and she could tell the difference. She told him about each painting she stopped at, when she'd made it, what she'd been trying to solve, whether she felt like she'd solved it. Some of them she hadn't solved. She said that plainly, without apology. These ones, I was trying to get to something and I didn't. I can see now where I stopped short, but I kept them anyway because the stopping short is also real. He understood stopping short. He understood keeping the evidence of it. When they came out of the room, something had shifted between them. Not dramatically, not with announcement. Just the natural shift that happens when two people have been in a real place together long enough that the pretense of not being in it fully becomes unavailable. She made more coffee. He sat at her kitchen counter and watched her do it with the comfort of someone who has been in a place enough times that it stopped being unfamiliar. Lily drew you, he said. She turned from the coffee machine. What? The drawing on my refrigerator, the one she made months ago. The uncolored figure she said she was saving space for. He looked at his coffee cup. She colored it in, this week. He paused. She told me it was you, she decided. Evelyn was very still for a moment. She stopped. She's only met me twice. She's been hearing about you more than twice, he said, and she's got her father's habit of paying attention. He looked up. She told me my face looked different, like when I know where I'm going. The kitchen was quiet. Evelyn set down the coffee cup she was holding and turned to face him fully, leaning back against the counter. She looked at him with the unguarded directness that he'd first seen in the hospital room at 2 a.m, and that she hadn't fully locked away again since. Do you? She asked. Know where you're going? He looked at her. More than I did in September, he said honestly. That's not a yes. No, he agreed. It's not. He thought about it the way he thought about structural problems, not rushing to the answer, trusting that the honest answer was worth taking the time to find. I know that what I was doing before, the very small life, just the job and Lily and the function of it, I know I don't want to go back to that. I know that. He met her eyes. And I know that when you texted me after the hospital that you delegated 3 things at 6 a.m., I thought, that's someone working to come toward me, and I wanted to work toward them back. What? She looked at him for a long moment. I'm not... She started, stopped, started again. I'm not going to be easy. I'm better than I was 2 months ago, and I'm going to keep getting better, but I'm not. The work thing, the control thing, the way I go quiet when I should talk, those don't resolve overnight. I know they don't. I know that too, he said. And you've got Lily, and the job, and your life is... She paused. Your life is already full of real things. I don't want to be something that... You're not something, he said, quietly but specifically, the way you say things you mean. You're Evelyn. He paused. And Lily already colored you in. So... She looked at him. Then she laughed. The real, full, unmanaged version. The one that arrived before she'd authorized it. And he thought, there it is. There's the one I want to keep hearing. That's not, she said, still half laughing. You can't use a 6-year-old's drawing as a relationship argument. I'm not arguing, he said. I'm just reporting. She looked at him with something that was warm and real and slightly helpless, in the way that only happens when you're feeling something you've worked hard not to feel and have run out of the energy to keep working against it. What happens next? She asked. I don't know exactly, he said. I know I want you to meet Lily properly. Not in passing, properly, when we've got time and it's not a hospital situation or a morning. I'm in a rush. He looked at his cup. I know I want you to do something with that room, the paintings, the organization you mentioned. He looked up. And I know that whatever the thing is that we're building here, I want to build it right, which means not rushing it and not running from it. Building it right, she repeated. Is that a construction metaphor? Everything's a construction metaphor if you spend enough time on job sites. She smiled, the quiet, real kind. Then she picked up her coffee and said, Okay. Okay, what? All of it, she said. Let's build it right. They had lunch. Actual lunch. The kind that required going to a grocery store first because Evelyn's refrigerator contained primarily condiments and sparkling water and 1 container of yogurt that she ate standing over the sink on mornings she remembered to eat. Nathan navigated the grocery store the way he navigated everything. Efficiently, without drama, the cart filling up with things that would make actual meals. She walked beside him through the aisles, and he noticed that she'd relaxed. Not fully. She didn't fully relax. It wasn't her nature, and he'd stopped expecting it to be. But enough. Enough to argue about pasta shapes, which she did with surprising conviction. Rigatoni, she said flatly. For this? No. Penne. Rigatoni holds the sauce. Penne is structural. She looked at him. Did you just describe pasta as structural? Everything is structural, he said, and put the penne in the cart. She put it back and added rigatoni. He looked at the cart, looked at her. Fine, he said. I run a company, she said serenely. I'm used to winning. The afternoon was ordinary in the particular way that ordinary afternoons between people who are figuring each other out can be extraordinary without being dramatic about it. She cooked, which she turned out to be competent at in the precise recipe-following way of someone who approaches cooking the same way she approached compliance briefs. The instructions exist for a reason, and deviating from them requires justification. He sat at her counter and talked to her while she did it, and the conversation moved through the comfortable territories they'd built over months. Lily's latest school situation, the job site progress, the expansion update, a book she'd been reading in the hospital that she hadn't expected to like, a thing that had happened on the job site last week that was technically a catastrophe and was in retrospect very funny. They ate at her table. The rigatoni was, he admitted privately, better than penne would have been. He didn't say this out loud. After they took their coffee to the windows and watched the afternoon move toward evening over the Sound. The light was doing the thing Seattle winter light did at this hour, flattening and deepening simultaneously, the water going from gray to silver to a dark blue that was almost convincing. I'm going to call the organization Monday, she said, about the paintings. Good. I'm going to offer them a show, and some of the pieces if they want them, for the therapy programs. That's a real thing to do, he said. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the water. The board meeting is in February, the annual review. I usually present alone, just me, the full year, the projections, the vision piece at the end. She paused. This year I'm going to have David and the regional directors present their own sections. I'm going to sit in the room and let them speak for themselves. He looked at her sideways. How long has your therapist been suggesting that? A pause. 18 months? And now you're doing it. And now I'm doing it. She looked at him. You don't get credit for that, by the way. It was always going to happen. I know, he said. I'm not taking credit. I'm just... He thought about the word. Noticing. She held his gaze for a moment, then she looked back at the water. Lily, she said, when do you want to... Next weekend, he said, if you're up for it. Something simple. There's a park she likes, near our neighborhood. Has a good playground. Nothing fancy. She's not picky. We could get lunch after. A park in December. She has opinions about fresh air. She sounds like someone I'd like, Evelyn said. She's already decided she likes you, he said. You're behind. She almost smiled. I'll catch up. The evening came in. He stayed for it, which had stopped requiring a decision and had started simply being the thing that happened when the afternoon ran into evening and neither of them reached for an exit. She put something on, a playlist of older music, the kind with no nostalgia attached because it was older than either of them. They talked less as the evening settled, the conversation becoming more occasional, more specific, less like two people establishing a connection and more like two people who have already established it and are simply existing in it. Around 9, he started gathering himself to leave. He'd check on Lily at Marcus's, drive home, run through the next week's logistics the way he always did on Sunday evenings. Real life, his real life, running its schedule. She walked him to the elevator. In the hallway, before he pressed the button, she turned to him. Nathan, she said. He looked at her. She put her hand on his arm, not on the scars. Hers were on the right, the inside, and she rarely touched them voluntarily. Just on his forearm, her palm warmed through his jacket sleeve. A specific touch, deliberate, not accidental. Thank you for the room, she said. For looking at it, for... She stopped, then pushed through the stop. For not making it less than it was. He put his hand over hers. The same thing he'd done at the dinner table in October. The same gesture, covering, steadying, the thing that said, I see it, and we can keep going. It's not less than it was, he said. Not even close. She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded once and stepped back, and he pressed the elevator button, and when the doors opened, he got in and she stayed in the hallway, and they looked at each other in that brief window before the doors closed. She looked, he thought, like someone who had put something down that they'd been carrying for a very long time. Not empty. Lighter. The specific lightness of someone who has been relieved of weight they forgot wasn't theirs to carry alone. The doors closed. He drove home through the Saturday night streets of Seattle, the rain starting up again, the windshield gathering it in small rivers. The truck made its usual sound at a red light. which he'd started thinking of as conversational rather than alarming. The city slid past. He thought about the locked room and what it had taken to open it, and what it meant that she had. He thought about rigatoni versus penne and how some arguments were worth losing. He thought about Lily's drawing on the refrigerator, the figure colored in with dark hair standing slightly apart from the others and slightly closer than before. He thought, one step at a time. That's how you build something real. One step at a time, checking the work, not rushing the cure. He picked up his phone at the next red light. He knew he wasn't supposed to, and sent a quick text. Rigatoni was good. Don't let it go to your head. He put the phone down. By the time he parked outside his apartment, the reply was waiting. It already has. Drive safe. He sat in the truck for a moment in the parking lot, the rain on the roof, the city doing its quiet Saturday night thing around him. He thought, this is what it feels like. When the walls move out. When the room gets larger. He thought, don't waste it. He got out of the truck and went inside, and the apartment was small and warm and had too much of Lily in it to feel empty. And the drawing on the refrigerator had been there long enough now that he'd stopped seeing it every time he walked past. But he saw it tonight. He stood in front of it for a moment, looking at the four figures. Nathan, Lily, Gerald, and the one with dark hair that Lily had decided was Evelyn, standing at the edge of the frame in the space she'd been saving. He thought, she looks like she belongs there. He went to bed. Outside, the rain came down steady and clean, the way it always did, washing the streets into mirrors. The city reflected back at itself. Bright and complicated and ongoing, full of locked rooms and open windows and the slow, unannounced business of two people deciding, without quite saying so yet, that they were not going to be alone anymore. The park Lily liked was called Meridian, which was a grand name for a fairly modest stretch of green space in their neighborhood. 2 basketball courts, a playground with a climbing structure that had seen better decades, a path that looped around a small pond where ducks lived with the entrenched confidence of longtime residents who knew the humans would feed them eventually. It was not impressive by any objective measure. Lily loved it with the total, uncomplicated loyalty that children reserve for things that have been reliably good to them. Nathan had suggested it for the same reason he'd suggested the diner near his job site for early coffee dates with Evelyn. It was his territory, which meant it was honest. He wasn't going to take Lily somewhere designed to impress. He wasn't going to manage the meeting into something it wasn't. He was going to bring 2 people he cared about to a pond with opinionated ducks on a cold December Sunday and see what happened. He was nervous about it. He didn't tell anyone he was nervous about it because there was no version of admitting that which didn't require more conversation than he had energy for. But he was. Evelyn texted him at 8:15 that morning, "I'm awake. Is it normal to be this nervous about meeting a 6-year-old?" He read it and felt something loosen in his chest. He typed back, "Completely normal. She's terrifying. That's not helpful. She likes people who are honest with her. Don't perform. She'll notice." A pause. Then, "She sounds like you. She's better than me at most things," he wrote. "See you at 11. He spent the morning getting Lily ready, which was its own operation. Lily had opinions about what she was wearing, not fashionable opinions, but thematic ones. Today she had decided she wanted to wear her orange rain boots and a purple sweater, and a hat that had small bear ears on it, which was technically the hat from the cereal box she'd picked out 2 months ago, and which she had somehow obtained and which Nathan had chosen not to investigate too closely. "Is Evelyn coming today?" Lily asked, while Nathan was helping her with her boot. "Yeah," he said. "Is that okay?" Lily considered this with the gravity she applied to most important decisions. "Does she like ducks?" "I don't know." "I'll find out," Lily said, with the tone of someone who has identified a critical variable and intends to assess it directly. Nathan looked at his daughter. "Just be yourself, okay? You don't have to—" "Dad!" Lily looked at him with the patient exasperation of a 6-year-old who is very clear on who she is. "I'm always myself." "Right," he said. "Sorry." Evelyn was already at the park entrance when they arrived, standing near the gate in a long coat and practical boots, her hands in her pockets, which Nathan had learned was what she did with her hands when she was nervous. Contained them, gave them something to do that wasn't visible. She'd worn her hair down again. She was watching them walk toward her from across the parking lot, with the particular expression of someone trying not to look like they're watching too intently and not quite succeeding. Lily spotted her immediately. She had no subtlety about it. She simply pointed and said, "Is that her?" "That's her," Nathan said. Lily looked, assessed. Then she started walking faster, which was not what Nathan had prepared for, and by the time he caught up, Lily had already arrived in front of Evelyn and was looking directly up at her with the complete, unguarded appraisal that only small children and certain animals can get away with. "Hi," Lily said. "I'm Lily." Evelyn crouched down to eye level, which was the right instinct, and which Nathan noted without commenting on. "Hi, Lily. I'm Evelyn." Lily looked at her for a moment. "Do you like ducks?" Evelyn glanced up at Nathan, who gave her nothing because this was her problem to solve, and he was curious how she'd solve it. "I don't know them very well," Evelyn said carefully. "I haven't spent a lot of time with ducks." "That's okay," Lily said generously. "I'll introduce you. There's one named Gerald, like my cat, who's the mean one, but he's only mean because he's scared. The others are fine." She considered. "Mostly." Evelyn looked at her with the expression of someone who has just received more information than they expected in a short span of time and is recalibrating accordingly. "Okay," she said. "Good to know." "Also," Lily said, "Dad says you run a big company." "I do," Evelyn said. "What kind?" "Healthcare. We help people get medical care in places where it's hard to find." Lily thought about this seriously. "Like a doctor, but bigger?" "Something like that. More like making sure doctors can get to where the people are." Lily nodded slowly in the way she nodded when she was filing information. "That's a good job," she said, with the tone of a final verdict. Then she reached out and took Evelyn's hand with the complete, trusting directness of a child who has decided something and sees no reason to delay acting on it. "Come see the ducks." Nathan watched Evelyn's face in the moment that Lily took her hand. The control dropped completely, entirely, for about 2 seconds. Not into sadness, not into anything heavy, into something simpler than that. Something that looked like being caught off guard by how much something mattered. She recovered quickly, stood up, and let Lily lead her toward the pond. Nathan followed them, his hands in his own pockets, and thought, there it is. That's the thing that was always going to happen if we got here. The ducks were present and opinionated, as advertised. Gerald, the one Lily had named after her cat, a large and apparently politically minded mallard who occupied the prime bread-receiving position near the bank with the air of someone who had established territorial claims and intended to defend them, assessed Evelyn with the frank disregard of a creature that owes humans nothing and knows it. "He doesn't like me," Evelyn said. "He doesn't like anyone at first," Lily said, with the authority of someone who has been studying this duck for months. "You have to let him decide." She reached into her coat pocket and produced a small bag of torn bread, which she apparently carried as standard equipment on park visits. "Here, hold your hand flat." Evelyn looked at the bread, looked at the duck. "Is he going to—" "Just flat," Lily said patiently. Evelyn held her hand flat. Gerald examined the situation with the slow, contemptuous assessment of a creature with nothing to prove, and then, after a significant pause that felt like a power move, took the bread. "See?" Lily said, satisfied. "He just decided I was worth talking to because I had food," Evelyn said. "He decided you were worth trusting," Lily corrected. "He knows about the food. He's deciding about you." Nathan, standing a few feet back, looked at his daughter, who was 6 years old and apparently also a philosopher. Evelyn looked at Lily with an expression that Nathan recognized. It was the same one he'd first seen across the table at Ember on 5th, the startled one. The one that arrived when something got past her defenses before she'd had the chance to put them up. She got that expression sometimes when the world did something realer than she'd been prepared for. "You're right," Evelyn said. "I take that back." Lily nodded, satisfied, and moved down the bank to address a different cluster of ducks. Evelyn drifted back to stand beside Nathan. They watched Lily hold court with the ducks in her orange boots and bear ear hat, completely in her element, explaining things to the ducks in the patient, specific way she explained things to people when she thought they needed information. "She's extraordinary," Evelyn said quietly. "Yeah," he said. "She is. She's also 7 years ahead of where I was at her age, emotionally. She has her moments," he said. "She also cried for 20 minutes last week because her toast broke." Evelyn looked at him. "She's a full person," he said. She just happens to have a very good day today. Evelyn smiled, looked back at Lily. How do you... She paused, looking for the question underneath the question. How do you do it? Raise a whole person while being a whole person yourself. Because I can't even maintain... I had one plant in my office and it died in September and I didn't notice for 3 weeks. I don't always do it well, he said honestly. I do it continuously. That's different. He watched Lily negotiate something with Gerald that appeared to involve territorial rights to a particular section of bank. The plant thing. That's the wrong frame. You're not bad at care, you're just used to directing all of it outward. At the company, at the work, at everything that needs you professionally. He paused. The plant died because you never had someone say, hey, also this thing needs you. Also, this small alive thing is your responsibility. She was quiet for a moment. And Lily is saying that. Lily took your hand, he said. She doesn't do that with everyone. They stayed at the park for nearly 2 hours, which was longer than Nathan had planned and shorter than Lily wanted. At some point, Lily had migrated from the ducks to the climbing structure, and Evelyn had followed her, and he'd watched from a bench as his daughter walked Evelyn through the specific protocol of the climbing wall. There was a particular route Lily favored, a sequence of handholds she'd named individually, which she explained to Evelyn with the comprehensive detail of a guide who takes their job seriously. Evelyn climbed it. She was not graceful about it, and she said so, and Lily found this genuinely funny rather than concerning, which was the right response to an adult who was willing to be bad at something in front of a child. You went the wrong way on the third part, Lily told her when she reached the platform at the top. I know, Evelyn said, slightly breathless. I saw it too late. You can go again if you want. Give me a minute, Evelyn said. Lily sat beside her on the platform, both of them looking out over the small park in the December gray, the pond and the ducks and the bare winter trees, and Nathan on the bench below, looking up at them. Do you love my dad? Lily asked. Nathan, on the bench, was too far to hear it. He saw Evelyn's posture change, the slight shift, the stillness, and knew something significant was being said. Later, driving home, Lily in the back seat asleep within 4 minutes the way she always was after park days, he asked Evelyn, what did she say to you on the climbing thing? Evelyn looked out the passenger window for a moment. She asked if I loved you, she said. The truck was quiet except for its usual sounds. Nathan kept his eyes on the road. What did you say? I said I was still figuring it out. A pause. She said that was okay. She said sometimes figuring out takes a while and it doesn't mean the answer isn't yes. Nathan drove. She's quoting me back at herself, he said after a moment. I told her that about something else entirely, months ago. She remembered it, Evelyn said, and applied it. Yeah. He glanced at her sideways. She does that. The answer to the question she hadn't given Lily, hadn't given him either, not directly, sat between them in the truck cab, not pressing, not demanding, just present, the way true things were present before you found the words for them. January came. The city shifted from the deep gray of December into the slightly different gray of January, which had a different quality to it, not warmer, but less dark. The days started to remember they were supposed to get longer. Evelyn made the call to the Burn Survivors Organization on the second Monday of the new year, as she'd promised herself. The conversation with their program director lasted 45 minutes, which was 30 minutes longer than Evelyn had prepared for, and ended with an invitation for Evelyn to come in and meet the staff and potentially discuss not just a painting show, but a mentorship component. Evelyn talking to survivors, specifically adult survivors who were navigating professional and public life with visible scarring. She told Nathan about it over the phone that evening. He was in his parking lot, not ready to go inside yet, sitting in the truck. I said yes, she said, to all of it. Good, he said. I'm terrified. I know. I keep thinking about... She stopped. In the locked room, some of those paintings, the ones from the first year. When I didn't know what I was doing, technically, and just put the thing in there raw, I keep thinking, those are the ones they'll respond to. Not the resolved ones, the incomplete ones. That makes sense, he said. It's uncomfortable. Showing people the unresolved version usually is. A pause on the line. Nathan. Yeah, "Thank you for making me show you the room," she said. "I know I technically made myself show you, but you—" She stopped. "You made it possible. There's a difference." He sat in his parking lot and looked at the Idaho-shaped water stain he couldn't see from here but knew was upstairs on his ceiling. "You would have gotten there," he said. "Maybe," she said, "but not yet." February brought the board meeting, which Evelyn had spent 6 weeks quietly, methodically restructuring. She sent Nathan the agenda 3 days before. Not for approval, just because she wanted someone who knew what it had cost her to see what she was doing. He read it on his lunch break, the revised format visible even in the agenda structure. David's section, the regional directors' sections, Evelyn's vision piece at the end rather than the beginning. She was letting her team carry the weight they'd been built to carry. He texted her. "This is a real thing you did." She wrote back, "Don't make me think about it too hard before Thursday. Fair. How's the espresso machine holding up?" "Adequately," she wrote. Then, "I missed the cafeteria version. Terrible, but honest." He smiled at his phone on a February lunch break and ate the rest of his sandwich. The board meeting went, by all reports that reached Nathan through Evelyn's subsequent account of it, not perfectly but well. David had presented strongly. 2 regional directors had handled questions that would previously have been routed to Evelyn automatically. Evelyn's vision piece at the end, which she'd written and rewritten 4 times before settling on a version that was shorter and more direct than any of the previous iterations, had landed the way things land when they're true, quietly, without needing to perform. The board chair said it was the best annual review in 3 years, she told him. "And," he said, "and I almost told him it was because I did less of it myself." She paused. "I didn't say that." "What did you say?" "I said I had a very good team." "Which is true." "Which is true," she agreed. "And it only cost me approximately 45 minutes of sitting on my hands while David spoke, instead of interrupting." 45 minutes of sitting on your hands, he said. "That's actually enormous." "I know," she said. "I timed it." March was when Evelyn's painting show opened. It was held at the Foundation's community center. Not a gallery, which had been an option, and which Evelyn had declined because a gallery felt like art, and she wanted it to feel like something else. Something less curated, more real. 18 paintings from the locked room, arranged in a space that had been a multipurpose room the week before and would be a multipurpose room the week after. Folding chairs, a small podium, coffee that was better than cafeteria quality and worse than what Evelyn made at home, which felt appropriate. Nathan arrived early with Lily, who was wearing the orange boots again and the bear ear hat, and who had been told this was an important night and had taken that information seriously enough to add a sparkly beret to the ensemble. Evelyn was already there talking to the program director when they came in. Nathan watched her from across the room. She was in a gray dress, her hair up, and she was animated in the way she got when something mattered to her that she hadn't learned to protect yet. The unmanaged version, the real one, the one that showed up in the locked room and at the pond with the ducks and in the hospital bed at 2 a.m. She saw them and something in her face did the thing it had started doing over the past few months. Opened rather than closed. Moved toward rather than away. Lily was already moving toward her. The room filled gradually. Survivors from the Foundation's program, staff, a few board members, a reporter from a local publication who had heard about the show through a press release Evelyn had approved with significantly less agonizing than Nathan had expected. There were 40 or 50 people in a room designed for more, which gave it the warm, slightly crowded quality of an event that belonged to the people in it. Nathan stood near the back with his coffee and watched people look at the paintings. He watched them stop at the large one, the figure that was falling and rising, the Seattle sky above it, and stand there longer than they stood at the others. He watched a woman in her 30s with visible scarring on her hands and forearms stand in front of it for a very long time, not moving, and then turn to her companion and say something he couldn't hear. He watched Lily walk very seriously from painting to painting, looking at each one the way she looked at things that interested her, fully, without hurry. He thought about the locked room in November, the smell of it, the way Evelyn had stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. He thought, look what was behind the door. Evelyn spoke from the small podium around 7:30. She had notes, but she didn't look at them much. She'd told Nathan she'd written them mostly to have them, because having a script made it easier to decide not to use one. She talked about the fire, She talked about it plainly, without dramatizing it, without performing the grief of it, just said what had happened and what she'd carried since and how long she'd carried it alone, because it had seemed like the only available option. She talked about the paintings and what they'd been for. She talked about the locked room. She didn't say Nathan's name, but she said, I had someone ask me once if I was sure that I was getting up rather than falling, and I couldn't fully answer it then. I can answer it now. She paused. Yes, I'm getting up. I've been getting up for 7 years. I just needed to stop doing it in private. The room was quiet in the way that rooms get quiet when something true has been said in them. Nathan looked at his coffee cup. He thought about a woman in a cafe in October rolling her sleeve back down and then stopping herself. The specific bravery of that stop. He thought, everything that followed came from that one decision, from the choice to be seen. After, there was the mild, warm chaos of people talking and moving through the space. The particular social atmosphere of events where something real has happened and everyone is navigating the combination of the real thing and the regular small talk around it. Lily found Evelyn immediately, appeared at her elbow from nowhere, and said something that made Evelyn laugh and then crouched down to Lily's level the way she'd done at the park. Nathan made his way over when the crowd around her thinned. Hey, he said. Hey. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright, not from crying, from the specific aliveness of having done something difficult and come through it intact. How was it? From the outside? It was right, he said. The whole thing was right. She looked at him for a moment, then she said, quietly enough that only he could hear, I've been figuring something out. He waited. Lily asked me in February, she said, and I said I was figuring it out, and I have been. She held his gaze. I love you. That's what I figured out. I wanted to say it in a real place, not over the phone, not in passing. She glanced around at the paintings on the walls, at the people in the room, at Lily, who was now crouched near the baseboard investigating something. This seemed like a real place. The room continued around them. People talking, coffee cups moving, Lily discovering whatever she'd discovered near the baseboard. Nathan looked at Evelyn Harper, CEO, painter, the most controlled and most genuinely brave person he'd met in his adult life, standing in front of her own unlocked paintings on a March evening in a multi-purpose room in Seattle, having said the true thing. I love you too, he said. I've known for a while. I was waiting for you to catch up. She looked at him. That's smug. Little bit, he said. She almost smiled. Then she did smile. The full one. The unguarded one that arrived before she authorized it. I can't believe you just said that. I can't believe you said yours first, he said. I thought I was going to have to work up to it. I ran out of patience, she said. I've been sitting on it since January. January. The board meeting, she said, driving home after. I thought, I'm in love with someone, which is, she shook her head slightly, inconvenient timing. February would have been worse, he said. Valentine's pressure. She looked at him. Are you always going to do that? Say the deflating thing right after the real thing? I'm going to try not to, he said. I probably won't always succeed. Fair, she said. Lily materialized between them, which she did sometimes with the silent approach of a child who has figured out how to move very quietly when the situation calls for it. Dad, she said, there's a beetle by the wall and I think it's lost. Okay, Nathan said. Can we help it? We can try. He looked at Evelyn. Beetle rescue. You in? She looked at him, at Lily, at the general situation. Yes, she said. Obviously. They went to find the beetle. Lily led, with purpose. Nathan and Evelyn followed, and somewhere in the business of locating a small, confused insect near the baseboard of a room full of art and people, their hands found each other without either of them deciding to make it a thing. Just hands finding each other the way things find each other when they've been moving in the same direction long enough. The beetle was relocated successfully to a planter near the building entrance, which Lily judged an appropriate outcome. Summer came slowly, the way Seattle summers came, earned rather than given, the warmth arriving in degrees after months of gray until one day in June, you went outside and the light was different and the city smelled like cut grass and salt water. and you understood that the season had quietly arrived while you were paying attention to other things. Nathan's apartment was different by summer. Not physically. Same water stain on the ceiling, same parking lot view, same cramped kitchen. But the quality of the life being lived in it had changed in the way that lives change when they expand to include more people properly rather than provisionally. Evelyn's coat was on the hook by the door, which had happened gradually, then permanently. Her specific brand of sparkling water had appeared in the refrigerator, then stayed. A small painting, not from the locked room, a newer one, smaller. A blue-gray piece that was clearly Seattle sky, but was also clearly something else, something lighter, was on the wall above the couch. She didn't live there. She still had the penthouse, still had the view of the Sound, still had the espresso machine. But she was there often enough that Lily had stopped announcing her arrivals and started simply absorbing them into the routine of the day, the way children absorb things that have become reliably present. "Evelyn's here," Lily would say, not looking up from whatever she was doing, as information, not announcement, which was its own kind of arrival. The truck got fixed in April. Nathan had finally taken it in, which Evelyn had advocated for with the persistent, evidence-based approach she brought to most problems she felt deserved solving. The exhaust issue turned out to be solvable for less than he'd feared. The truck ran quietly now, which felt strange for about a week, and then became the new normal. He was promoted to crew lead in May. Cliff delivered the news in his customary style, briefly, without sentiment, with the particular directness of a man who trusted you to know what something meant without being told what to feel about it. Nathan accepted it the same way. He called Evelyn from the parking lot at the job site, sitting in the quiet truck. "Crew lead," she said. "Yeah." "Nathan." The way she said his name, the specific weight of it. "That's real." "It's more hours," he said. "I'm still working out how—" "We'll work it out," she said. Not managing it, not solving it preemptively, just, "we'll work it out." The "we" doing the work of the sentence. He sat in the quiet truck and thought, there it is. There's the thing that changed, not a dramatic thing, not a movie thing, just, "we'll work it out." The small, real architecture of two people who have decided to face the same direction. On a Saturday evening in late June, they were on the balcony of the penthouse, Lily asleep inside on the couch, Biscuit, the elderly cat, occupying approximately 60% of the available couch space and expressing no opinion on this arrangement, the Seattle skyline doing its summer evening thing below them, the water catching the late light in long silver lines. Evelyn had a glass of wine, Nathan had a beer. Neither of them was talking, which was the good kind of not talking, the kind that had been built over 9 months of also talking, so that the silence had context and weight and warmth. She was looking at the city. He was watching her look at it. "The organization asked me about next year," she said, after a while. "The show. They want to do it again, bigger, and they want me to help develop the mentorship curriculum more formally, not just occasional appearances, a real program structure." "What did you say?" "I said I'd think about it." She traced the rim of her glass. "I don't have to think about it. I said yes the moment they asked. I just needed to practice the part where I don't make every decision in under 4 seconds. A pause. "My therapist calls it tolerating the process." "How's that going?" "The practice or the therapy?" "Both. The therapy is good," she said. "The practice is hard." She glanced at him. "I rewrote David's Q2 summary draft twice before I sent it back with only one suggested revision." "Progress," he said. "I'm choosing to believe that," she said. She looked back at the skyline. "The expansion launched. Both markets. The compliance issues are resolved. The communities we designed it for are actually, they're using it. The clinics are seeing patients." She said it quietly, without the triumphant CEO register. Just, "the thing we built is doing what it was built to do. My parents would have—" She stopped. He waited. "My mother was a nurse," she said, "before I was born. Before she stopped to raise me. I didn't know until I was in college, and I found her old uniform in a box." She looked at the water. "She never talked about it. I used to wonder why she stopped, whether she missed it." She turned the glass. "I think she would have liked what the company does. The rural access piece especially. I think she would have—" She stopped again. I think she would have said something practical and slightly embarrassing in public, the way she always did, and I would have been annoyed in the moment, and I would have thought about it for years afterward. Sounds about right, he said. She looked at him sideways. You didn't know her. No, but you described her the way people describe someone who embarrassed them into becoming who they are. He held her gaze. That's a specific kind of person. She looked at him for a moment. Yes, she said. That's exactly what she was. They were quiet together. Below them, the city breathed its summer breath, the bars and restaurants beginning to light up, the water holding the last of the evening light, with the particular patience of things that have held light many times before. I used to look at this view and think about how far I'd come, Evelyn said, from where I was after the fire, from the person who didn't know if getting up was possible. She paused. Now I look at it and think about where I'm going. She shook her head slightly. That's different. That's a real difference. Yeah, he said. It is. She turned to him fully, the way she turned to things she was deciding to face directly. I'm happy, she said. It came out slightly uncertain, not because she doubted it, but because she was still learning the texture of it, still learning what it felt like in her mouth, in her chest, this particular state that she'd been managing around for years without ever quite landing in. I don't say that I'm not trying to make it a thing. I just want to say it to someone who knows what it cost. Because it costs something, and She stopped. I want someone to know the cost and the thing at the same time. He looked at her in the last of the summer evening light, at the person who had rolled a sleeve back down and then stopped herself in a cafe in October and changed the direction of both of their lives with that one decision. At the CEO and the painter and the woman who'd climbed a children's climbing wall badly and named ducks and sat in hospital rooms and opened locked doors and said true things in front of rooms full of people who needed to hear them. I know, he said. Both things. She nodded, looked back at the city. Inside, Biscuit made a sound that was probably a complaint about something. Lily stirred on the couch, resettled, went back under. The ordinary sounds of a life being lived by people who were in it together. Nathan looked at the city below them, at the water going dark now as the light finally left it, at the lights coming on in windows all across Seattle, each one its own particular world, its own specific accumulation of ordinary and difficult and ordinary again. He thought about what he knew now that he hadn't known a year ago. Not wisdom exactly. He was skeptical of wisdom. It usually turned out to be just experience with better posture. More like facts. Things he had discovered to be true. The first was that loneliness wasn't about being alone. He'd been alone technically for years before Evelyn, alone in rooms, alone in trucks, alone at 3 a.m. with a water stain on his ceiling, and that hadn't been the worst of it. The worst of it was the contraction, the way the walls of your life moved inward over time when you stopped expecting them to hold anything but the minimum, when you stopped leaving space for things that weren't necessary, when necessary became the ceiling. The second was that strength that looks strong from the outside and is something else from the inside is one of the loneliest things a person can carry. He'd seen it in Evelyn. He'd recognized it because he'd done his own version of it. And he knew that the difference between carrying it and setting it down wasn't courage, exactly. It was permission. Someone who said, you can put some of it here. I'll hold the other end. The third was about Lily, about raising a person who said things like the clouds look worried. And I'm saving that space and figuring out takes a while, but it doesn't mean the answer isn't yes. He had worried for years that Lily was getting the incomplete version of what a family could look like. One tired father, a cat, a cramped apartment, dinners that were sometimes cereal. He understood now that she hadn't been getting an incomplete version. She'd been getting an honest version. And honest, it turned out, was better preparation for the world than perfect would have been. She'd been watching the whole time, filing it away, applying it. She'd been saving space, and she'd known before he did who was going to fill it. He thought about something Evelyn had said in the hospital in February, the night before the board meeting, that she'd been terrified about. I thought nobody could love someone like me. I was so certain of it that I built my whole life around the certainty. He thought about how many people were doing exactly that right now, building whole lives around the certainty that they were too damaged, too complicated, too far from whatever the acceptable version of a person was supposed to look like. building empires out of the refusal to need anyone, building walls out of the fear of what was on the other side. He thought, the walls are just walls. They can come down. Not easily, not all at once, not without cost, but they can come down. Hey, he said. She looked at him. Thank you, he said, for showing up to that dinner. She looked at him for a moment, the slight surprise of it. They'd never said it directly, never named the beginning as the beginning in so many words. Marcus's idea, she said. You showed up anyway. I almost didn't. I know, he said. You did, though. She held his gaze. So did you. So did I, he agreed. Below them, Seattle moved through its summer evening. The water held the lights of the city on its surface. The whole bright, complicated thing of it reflected back, doubled. The real city and its mirror image, both incomplete, both ongoing, both needing the dark water to show them what they looked like from the outside. Evelyn leaned against him, not dramatically, just the lean, the weight of another person who has decided you're the place they want to be. He put his arm around her. Inside, Lily slept on the couch with Biscuit, who was old and deaf and had outlasted more things than any of them, and apparently intended to keep doing so. On Nathan's refrigerator in the apartment 2 miles from here, a drawing was on the door. 4 figures, all of them colored in, all of them exactly the right size for the space they occupied. On the wall of a community center in Renton, 18 paintings hung in a multi-purpose room that had been transformed for a week and would become ordinary again, except for the people who had stood in front of those paintings and recognized something in them and carried that recognition home. In 2 healthcare markets in rural Washington, clinics that hadn't existed a year ago were seeing patients. On a job site in Bellevue, a crew would show up Monday morning to a project that was, by Nathan's assessment, about 60% done and structurally sound. The kind of thing that, if you built it right and took the time to let it cure, would hold the weight it was designed to hold. None of it was perfect. That was the whole point. Perfection was a way of never finishing anything, never committing to anything, never being truly inside anything because you were always surveying it from outside, looking for the flaw that would justify your distance. Real things were uneven. Real things had bad exhaust pipes and water stains and rigatoni arguments and beetles that needed rescuing, and 6-year-olds who cried about broken toast and CEOs who timed how long they sat on their hands. Real things had rooms that stayed locked for 7 years and then opened. Real things had 2 people standing in a parking lot at 4:47 in the morning, internally composing the case for not trying and then trying anyway. Real things lasted not because they were strong enough to withstand everything, but because 2 people kept choosing them, kept showing up, kept saying, I'm not going anywhere. Nathan held Evelyn against his side on the balcony of a penthouse he didn't live in, above a city that belonged to neither of them and both of them. And he thought, this is it. This is the thing. Not the arrival, not the destination. The choosing. Every day, the choosing. He'd spent years believing that his ordinary life made him invisible, that the concrete dust and the dented thermos and the cramped apartment and the years of making the machine run were somehow evidence of a smallness that couldn't be outgrown. He understood now that he'd been looking at it wrong. The ordinary life wasn't a limitation. It was the foundation. You couldn't build anything real on air. You built it on the actual ground of a person, their daily shape, their real habits, the way they drank their coffee and talked to their kid and showed up to things even when they didn't feel like it. He'd been building the foundation for years. He'd just been building it alone. The city light shimmered on the water below. Evelyn traced the scars on her forearm absently, the way she sometimes did when she wasn't thinking about it. Not with shame, not with grief, just, these are here. They're mine. They're part of the map of me. She didn't cover them. She hadn't covered them in months. It's a good city, she said quietly. Yeah, he said. It is. From up here you can't see the bad parts. That's why you have to live down in it, he said. She considered that. Is that another construction metaphor? Everything is, he said. She almost smiled. He felt it against his shoulder. Inside, Lily made a sound in her sleep, some dream narrative being processed, some world being built in the space behind her eyes. Biscuit shifted, resettled, resumed the ancient cat business of existing with supreme indifference to the complications of the humans around him. Outside, Seattle went on being itself, difficult and beautiful and rain-soaked and striving, full of people making the same calculations that people have always made, whether to stay or go, whether to open or close, whether the thing in front of them is worth the risk of wanting it. Nathan and Evelyn stayed on the balcony until the last light was gone from the water. Then they went inside. That was all. That was everything. That was enough.